The next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time.
Williams who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public is not being told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 6, and we are here, ladies and gentlemen, for the duration to bring you all the thrills and spills of what's been going on overnight, because let me tell you, it's been quite eventful. The time now, of course, is approximately coming up to dawn, right? But a few hours ago, just maybe 3 or 4 hours ago, if you were paying attention, you wouldn't have been up to watch it probably, but Donald Trump, President of the United States of America, the 47th President, was up in Congress speaking for 1 hour and 40 minutes, basically telling everyone that Zelensky, Volodymyr Zelensky, is ready to come to the table. He's written a letter to him. He's told him that he's ready to sign the minerals deal. He's told him he's ready to end the war. He's told him he's ready to go for peace. And he's told him basically that the game is up. So Donald Trump, once again, has played his cards quite close to his chest. He told Zelensky when he was in the White House, you don't have any cards left to play. And sure enough, he doesn't. And that's why he's written to Trump to say, I'm very happy to do whatever it is that you want. I'm very grateful for everything that you've done so far. So let's get on with it. So let us indeed get on with it. But of course, there's one slight problem. The Europeans, because the European Union have pledged £800 billion to Ukraine to carry on fighting the war, which apparently Ukraine now doesn't want to do. Keir Starmer says that he made a phone call to Zelensky to persuade him to write the letter to Donald Trump. If you believe that, we've got some swampland in Florida to sell you. He also says, and we'll find out why he said it from Theo Usherwood, who's here with us, that he made a phone call to Donald Trump shortly before Donald Trump pulled all the aid to Ukraine. But of course, what we now know is that Trump didn't tell him he was going to pull all the aid. So I'm afraid Keir Starmer's looking a bit like the little boy lost in the middle of the field. The coach has gone back to school and he didn't get back on it, I'm afraid. So he's left all alone, wondering what to do next. It looks very bad for Britain, it looks very bad for Europe, and it looks as though Donald Trump once again has stitched everybody up. So we'll be talking about that, of course, amongst many other things, including that Labour are now being accused of cozying up to China. Whatever next? Plus, Rachel Reeves ready to cut public spending to build up the military. A boy aged 16 has been shot dead in South London. It barely makes the papers. That's how ridiculous it is. And, of course, we're going to be finding out why it is that there are 1 million people in this country who have come here from elsewhere who don't speak any English. I'll just repeat that to you. Don't speak any English at all. Absolutely extraordinary story. We'll be exploring that. It's a study that's been done by the Conservatives, and they're wondering what is going wrong with our immigration system. We've got a migrant of the day, of course, as well. This is a couple from El Salvador. We'll tell you all about them as well. 5 minutes past 6. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on with this.
Morning, Mike. Brian from Southend. Great show as normal.
Hi, Mike. Bob here from sunny Cambridge again.
Welcome to the Hotel Lindsay Hoyle.
For all we know, he probably stayed in the Premier Inn before he became Speaker and travelled by EasyJet. And now look at him flying around first class, staying in the best hotels in the world. Surely that itself tells you that he's taking the mick.
Yeah, we've got an update for Lindsay Hoyle as well. We'll bring you all of that. This is Morning Glory, and let's do it. So, let's say very good morning to Theo Usherwood. Theo, good to see you.
Very good morning.
Welcome to the show. We've got an awful lot to get on with because an awful lot has happened since I went to bed last night. I didn't stay up to watch Trump because I thought you can't really do both things. So, we've got a whole raft of clips to show. But he basically made the longest speech that's ever been made in Congress.
100 minutes.
1 hour, 40 minutes, I think it was, yeah. And so, well, it's the same thing, isn't it? Sorry. I mean, I go 1 hour and 40 minutes, you go 100 minutes. But, I mean, we have come to the place where I've been saying we would come for a long time. There's been an awful lot of toing and froing. A lot of people get obsessed yesterday with J.D. Vance and what he said about troops, which he didn't actually say he said about British or French troops, so I don't know where you stand on that. I think it's a bit of a distraction. Some of the papers have gone headlines with that, saying, you know, J.D. Vance is a disgrace.
The most important thing was the point, and I know people got really upset about it, and that's quite right. I've interviewed the victims of, you know, the families of people who lost their lives, who gave their lives to this country in Afghanistan. The most important thing he was saying, though, is that the best guarantee is you have American workers in Ukraine. That will be enough to deter Vladimir Putin from attacking. And of course that's where we've ended up with this mineral.
But again, we've got people on this side of the Atlantic who are so convinced that they want to take offence at everything that Vance and Trump do that they focus on all of that, like they were focusing last Friday on the bus stop in the Oval Office, which anybody sensible, including myself and Piers Morgan, said is not important. You know, stop focusing on things that aren't important. Focus on what's important, and that's ending the bleeding war.
But Vance is playing from the same playbook. It's Donald Trump's playbook. It belongs to Donald Trump, and that is to throw a grenade into the room.
He's got the playbook, and he's also got the ball, by the way.
But it's you know, Zelensky's a dictator. Everybody gets really upset. Zelensky's not a dictator. He's you know, he's the elected leader of a democratic country. You know, that's the way he does it. But the key thing, and this is something actually, this isn't in my view, it's what actually the government has tried to do, is to focus on the substance of what is actually being said. And the substance of what is being said is the only game in town right now, the only deal that can be done is with American workers getting some payback. The American taxpayer getting some payback for support. And the way we do that is a mineral deal. That is the substance of what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance were saying, and they've come to that point.
And I read a really good piece in the Times yesterday by William Hague, who I'm not normally a fan of at all, so I normally don't even read his column, but I thought I'll have a look at this because it looks interesting. And he made the point that basically if you look at this through the prism of where Trump is in the presidency right now, it's not about NATO, it's not about Europe, it's not about even Ukraine, it's about saving money. You know, he's on a crusade basically to cut through government spending, to absolutely expose the waste that's been going on in the Biden administration for decades with some of these government departments. And he sees this as yet another government department that's full of waste. And so he sees sending hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine as an absolute no-no, because that would be inconsistent with every other policy he's got domestically.
Yes, and I think there's a broader point that, and this is, you know, if you look to America, if you just try and see it through the average Joe's eyes in America, they don't have a health system that's funded. They don't have pensions. You eat what you kill. Basically, it's a tough life being a middle class American or even a working class American.
I mean, they do have more protections than what you've just described. I mean, I know that from living there. I mean, I know that you can look at various different aspects of how the health system works and say it doesn't work. But there are many parts of it that do work very well.
But it's a capitalist society, right? And much more so than in Europe, where you have, you know, people wanting to retire at 55. You have you know, state pensions, and the point, the reason I'm making this point, Mike, is that actually the reason that where they really do spend money in the public sector in America is on defence. how do we get the you know, the point that, seeing it from their point of view, is, you know, in Europe you have this, you know, luxury lifestyle. You can go to France, and you go to France in August, everybody's on holiday.
Yeah.
Nobody works in France in August, right? Everybody takes a month off.
Yeah.
You don't get that in the United States.
You also don't get politicians in the United States going, we'll have to put taxes up to pay for public services, because they don't want to put taxes up. They don't put petrol taxes up. I mean, their petrol is about half the price of ours, and they're still complaining about it because they spend half their life in their cars. But let's kick off with some of Trump's performance from last night, because it was, as ever, a bit of a tour de force for the president. Here he is talking about common sense, and we are, of course, the home of it.
Past 6 weeks, I have signed nearly 100 executive orders and taken more than 400 executive actions, a record, to restore common sense, safety, optimism, and wealth all across our wonderful land. The people elected me to do the job, and I'm doing it.
And I mean, you can't say fairer than that, can you? The people elected me to do the job, and I'm doing it. And that's exactly what he's doing, and this is all part of it. And so, you know, at the end of the day, I don't know what Starmer's going to do now, because he's now, you were explaining to me that it was only really because of people like yourself in the lobby pushing his people that it became clear that he's spoken to Donald Trump the night before last, when Trump pulled the aid from Ukraine.
But he didn't know. He didn't. It was clear. So at around 4:30 in the afternoon, Keir Starmer was asked about the US position and the idea of putting American workers in, and whether the Americans would pull military support. He was categorical. That is not, as I understand it, the American position, right? So that's in the afternoon. Fast forward to the early evening. He then has a call with Donald Trump, and sets out the position from the UK perspective and from Zelensky's perspective. But it's clear in that call, from the conversations that we've had with his spokesman, or that happened in the daily meeting, he wasn't given any idea, he wasn't kept in the loop that Donald Trump was simply going to pull the rug from under Europe and say that actually the US is going to pull all military aid, which of course includes, and this is the bit that is up, you know, really got under the skin of the Europeans, including aid that's already in transit that was given by Joe Biden. I mean, there's stacks of military aid.
Well, they're saying this morning that they'll run out of everything in about 2 or 3 months if it's not changed. And funnily enough, the Mail's got a good piece today from their diplomacy editor, Mark Nichol, saying Washington stops UK from sharing US military intelligence with Kiev as well, because that's now something that has happened. And funnily enough, Philip Ingram, who's on this station an awful lot, said this is exactly what I would have expected to happen, because once you stop the aid, you stop the cooperation, you stop the flow of information as well.
Yes, and of course a lot of the technology is American technology, and you need American parts and American support in order to operate that technology, or for the Ukrainians to operate that technology. As you say, this would be, and we saw what happened when there was that row in Congress and that $66 billion worth of aid held up. How quickly Putin made serious advances into Ukraine, the devastating impact it had on Ukraine's strategy. Europe doesn't have the wherewithal, you know, whatever Ursula von der Leyen said yesterday, they don't have the wherewithal to fill that gap at such short notice. So it was clear that without, you know, this decision to pull support, you know, military support from the United States, completely pulled the rug, and that's why you know, Keir Starmer is now claiming the credit, and Number 10 is claiming the credit that Keir Starmer had that phone call with Zelensky.
Yeah, but that's not. Because Zelensky has already written that letter before he spoke to Starmer anyway, because he's already painted into a corner, and he didn't really have any choice. Let's have another hit from Donald Trump. This is him talking about the Democrat Senator Elizabeth Warren.
With no end in sight, the United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense, with no security, with no anything. Do you want to keep it going for another 5 years? Yeah, you would say Pocahontas says yes. $2,000 people are being killed every single week. More than that.
Well, I mean, he speaks the truth there, because only in Europe would you get Ursula von der Leyen, a woman who, when she was defence minister of Germany, ran out of bullets and guns and used to have to give broom handles to the German troops to practice, you know, their manoeuvres in. You know, in Europe we're saying ignore the people, ignore what the people are saying, and just give loads more money to Ukraine that we don't have, right? Yeah. You know, Rachel Reeves on the front page of the Telegraph today, ready to cut back on public services and public spending to provide extra firepower for the military. Well, that's fine. The people will be happy with that for our military, but not for the Ukraine military, and that's the difference. Whereas in America, again, they build up their own military. They're not giving any more to Ukraine. That's what the people voted for.
Yes, but we knew this was coming. There seems to be this huge degree of surprise in Europe that this would happen. Right. We knew that Donald Trump was standing on a populist agenda. Yeah. We knew that Donald Trump, and we knew beforehand that he had a very dim view of Ukraine. Yeah. We know that, you know, from his first term, that he had a decent relationship with Vladimir Putin. Yeah. All of these things were in the public domain. They were known about, and I just don't understand. Europe has looked, and we've looked very flat-footed in the fact that we're suddenly turning around now saying, like, I mean, they should have been listening to this show. Situation? For a start, they would have learned a lot more than they already know. And also this kind of Trump derangement syndrome that exists. You know, they thought, they were so sure that Kamala Harris was going to win the Labour Party that they sent 200 people over to help her do so, which didn't look great either. Zelensky did the same thing. He was over, you know, it was one of the things J.D. Vance said to him in the Oval Office. He said, you know, you were actually campaigning for the Democrats, you know, before the election. What were you doing that for? You might say it's a small petty point, but it's a point nonetheless. Similarly, where you've got sort of, you know, the idea that that somehow Europe has got any kind of leverage over what happens in America is pathetic and just ludicrous. And you know, they don't seem to yet understand that Trump is friendly with Putin for one reason only: he wants to stop the war. There's been loads of great pictures published in the last 24 hours, by the way, of Joe Biden with Putin, of George W. Bush showing him around his ranch in Texas, of, you know, Hillary Clinton laughing and joking with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. You know, these politicians are all the same, right, at the end of the day. But Trump singularly seems to be the one that gets trouble from Western politicians who hate him because he's Donald Trump. So they've all done it. They've all been pictured with Putin. I think if my memory serves me correctly, you know, the Britain was at one point cozying up to, or trying to bring Russia in from the cold with Vladimir Putin. But of course, you know, that changed in 2014 when he went into Crimea and took Crimea. And
but nobody did anything about it.
Nobody did anything about it, and nobody did anything about it when, you know, when they put, you know, Russia, you know, Putin put hundreds of thousands of troops and military on the border with Ukraine. Yeah. And we sat back and said, okay, well, we'll support Ukraine. Nobody actually stepped up and said, this is unacceptable. Right. We'll put a NATO force on the border because we think that Ukraine is part of the West. Yeah. And Rachel Reeves's announcement, and of course the announcement when it comes to that 2.5% of, you know, from last week to increase spending by 2.5% of GDP by 2027, is about looking ahead. But this isn't going to solve the problem. This isn't going to solve the problem now. And I think the fear in the West, in Western Europe at least, is that what happens with this deal, and this may be where this ultimately brings down Zelensky, is what happens with this deal is that you have American workers operating as the security guarantee in Ukraine, but that actually, given the close relationship between Putin and Trump, and this is, you would expect to be the fear, that actually Ukraine quite quickly falls into a soft coup, whether there are elections and a pro-Putin candidate then takes over, we don't know, but actually Ukraine quite quickly.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time, would it? And that's the point. That is the point. You know, Ukraine is not a, you know, what you might call a bona fide democracy like the Western democracies that we enjoy in the West of Europe. It just isn't. And there's no point pretending it is. I mean, meanwhile, we've got a piece in the Mail from a Ukrainian who lives in Britain saying basically, I think this is now the signal and the time for Zelensky probably to have outlived his usefulness, and that's the end of him. Once that movement starts, there we are. Meanwhile, Labour has been accused of placing its relationship with Beijing over national security after leaving China off a new register aimed at preventing plots and espionage on British soil. This is another piece in the Mail. MPs from all parties rounded on the government for failing to take the threat of the Chinese Communist Party seriously. Well, what's happened to Keir Starmer and his, you know, his band of merry men fighting the good fight for Western democracy?
Yeah, this is an extraordinary decision, and there have been. This is a foreign. You know, there's a foreign register. If you deal with a if you deal with a foreign government, then you have to make a declaration that you're dealing with foreign governments, and there are different tiers.
Right.
And the most significant...
You think China would be on the top one, wouldn't you?
The top tier is reserved, they put Iran in there. If you're dealing with Iran, then you have to make a declaration, which is going to be it's going to be quite difficult for some people on the very, very left of British politics. They're going to have to make some declarations there, I would have thought.
Yeah.
But what's more interesting, and you raised this point and what's been raised in the Mail, is that there are many people, particularly people like Ian Duncan-Smith, Tom Tugendhat on the Conservative Party, very wary of Chinese influence and saying, actually...
Well, because they've been put on a list by China.
They've been put on a sanctions list by China, saying, actually, China needs to go on this scheme, so that if you're dealing with China, then you need to make a declaration that you have business dealings with China. And Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves see China as a huge economic opportunity.
Well, she's been there already. They've only been in less than a year. And she'll no doubt go back again. But listen, we've got lots to get on with today, so I'm going to rush us through, I'm afraid. Morning, Mike, says Zoe. Any peace deals made, Putin will make sure the EU won't be involved. He just wanted the USA and Ukraine involvement. It might be time Starmer looked at our borders now instead of somebody else's. Well, a lot of people said that towards the end of last week. I was one of them. Look after our own borders before we start worrying about Ukraine's borders, to be honest. 6:21. Theo Ashford and I back after this.
I didn't like what J.D. Vance said today. But you have to say one thing, Hamish. It has made a difference. It looks to me like this country in Europe has woken up to the threat from Russia and the rest of the world. And I don't think it's wrong that America should be wiping our backside the whole time. Maybe you disagree.
No, I don't, Jeremy. I think you're absolutely right. You know, if it has galvanised Europe to realise that we must defend ourselves, then yeah, I think it has had an effect.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Theo Ushwood is here with us as well. We're running through the papers this morning. We've got lots to talk to you about. We've also got plenty of Donald Trump clips to play you as well. Here's one from Lisa, I'm sorry. Rach from Complaints is now all about cuts, and growth. It seems to have gone a bit quiet, doesn't it? It feels like we're all in the ocean just being pulled around and not knowing where we will end up. Hang on for the ride, Mike. Great show as always. Well, interestingly enough, there's a piece that Alex Phillips actually has just put out a few hours ago. Wes Streeting tweeted out last night, little did we know when we held the first big iftar in Parliament, which was Said Warsi's idea nearly a decade ago, that we'd be here holding the big iftar in Westminster Hall with the Prime Minister. So in the midst of all of this, Prime Minister Keir Starmer is having a big iftar to celebrate Ramadan Mubarak. I'm sure there'll be people who'll be very interested to see that, because people were moaning yesterday that the Church of England seems to have forgotten that it's Lent. You know, they wished everybody happy Ramadan, as did the royal family. But nobody's mentioned Pancake Tuesday or the fact that it's Lent. We now get a story in The Sun, which may or may not be related to that, which says that there's now practically 1 million people in this country who have come here from elsewhere, who either don't speak very good English or don't speak English at all. Yeah, this is an extraordinary story, isn't it? Page 80 of The Sun is Jack Elsom's exclusive story. These are figures that the Conservatives have got out of the UK Statistics Authority, so official figures, right? And they found that 8.6% of migrants arriving, that's equal to around, was just shy of 800,000 people, 794,000 people, cannot speak English well, and then around 1.4%, that's 137, cannot speak it at all. And the point that Jack's making, that Jack makes in the article, is that, and the Tories are making, is that it's absolutely critical to integrating into British society culture that you can speak the language. Yes. And if you can't speak the language, then it's very difficult. But of course, the Tories struggled with this, didn't they, during their 14 years in charge, when the migrants, the illegal migrants in particular, exploded, and the big story was of over 1 million people coming every single year to do various jobs. And people tell me all the time that they run up against this, particularly in the public sector, where they'll be talking to people who are supposedly employed by the UK government or by local authorities or by the NHS or something like that, who don't speak very good English. Yes, and it's ridiculous. And you mentioned, of course, that this is a problem under the Tories. These are figures from the 2021 census, when, of course, the Conservatives were in. But they talked, didn't they? They talked a good game about making sure that people took some kind of English test, or that if you came here, you had to assimilate and you had to be able to show that you could speak English. What happened to that? Well, it clearly hasn't been implemented. Of course, you have work. These are through, of course, for the big numbers that we're talking around here. This is through legal migration, through visa routes. People coming into the country, and of course able to bring, and the Tories work to close this loophole, or close loopholes to varying degrees of success, but bringing their family over as well. But you can still do that if you're coming on a work visa. Yes. You know, you can't do it any longer on a student visa. But, you know, I tell that story that I was told by a Border Force, former Border Force chief, actually, who said he'd spoken to a friend of his, and it's the same old story. 3 women who came from Africa, I think it was Nigeria they were coming from, 3 women who had been employed by the NHS as nurses. Each of them had a husband, that's another 3. Each of them had 5 kids. 21 people coming in for 3 jobs. And you're probably not going to tell me that the English that they would speak would be perhaps as good as it ought to be. And of course, the argument that's made is we need these migrants, people to come over and do the jobs in the NHS or elsewhere. But actually, whilst it has contributed to growth, if you look at growth per capita, i.e. per head, GDP per head, it's actually gone down rather than gone up. So because whilst these people are doing jobs in the NHS or whatever, the contribution they're making through the tax system doesn't match their, the pull on education, the NHS, and other services that, of course, they need to access. Exactly right. Let's get Trump on government waste, because he's the man that knows how to cut that.
$40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. Nobody knows what that is. $8 million to promote LGBTQI+ in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of. $60 million for indigenous peoples and Afro-Colombian empowerment in Central America. $60 million.
It is mind-boggling what they've uncovered. I mean, Elon Musk and his Doge unit. I mean, it is absolutely staggering how much money has been given to organisations. And I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. An awful lot of this stuff it was said to me, it's akin to getting a subscription on Apple or something like that and forgetting to cancel it. But except in this case, it's millions and millions of dollars. It's not just $2.99 a month or something. But it's the same syndrome.
And it's the same. And we had it here. And Harry and Jack from The Sun have done huge amounts of work in terms of supporting prawn. Supporting prawn. Was it in Bangladesh? Research into the welfare of prawns
and the behaviour of them or something like that. And surely before you put them into a prawn curry and eat them, I don't think it really matters, does it? Let's talk briefly about the Speaker of the House. We did a big story on it yesterday. The Mail were all over this, and we got some really, really good feedback from the nation. The people really were so angry that Sir Lindsay Hoyle, "Just Stop Hoyle," became the slogan. That Lindsay Hoyle thinks he can swan around the world, spending $23,000, sometimes more, on a trip to somewhere like Singapore. But today, the follow-up story is that one of his trips, actually, he put in a bill for an extra £500 to fly because he wanted to take an extra suitcase with him.
It's unacceptable.
I mean, what is wrong with these people?
It's just unacceptable. And the point. The point is that, and the Mail have done a really good freedom of information request, but nobody, if it was just if he had to put his hand in his own pocket, he'd just leave he'd just go, well, I'm not going to take that extra pair of underpants or that extra pair of swimming trunks.
He's obviously not taking stuff. He's taking an empty suitcase in order to bring a load of loot back, isn't he? I mean, that's why you take an extra suitcase, isn't it?
For
all the freebies you're going to get. But also, as people pointed out, if you're going to explain the brilliance of how British democracy works and British Parliament, the mother of all parliaments, works, and you want to go to somewhere like the Cayman Islands, which is a tax haven. Exactly why are they not hosting you? Why are you spending the money to go there? That's the bit I don't get.
And I don't understand the benefits of visiting somewhere like St Helena, which is basically the remotest, if I remember correctly, it's the remotest island in the world, one of the remotest islands in the world, which is a British overseas territory in the middle of the South Atlantic. I mean, what benefit is that going to...
It's a jolly, isn't it? Let's face it.
Who was that? Who was that voice note? You had a great voice note in there from one of your listeners. What benefit? He's the person who's funding it, by the way. He's the person who's paying.
We're all funding it.
It's his taxes that are paying.
That was the guy that did the Hotel California stick, didn't it?
So he looks at he gets his pay slip at the end of the month, or he sits down with his spreadsheet at the end of the month from running his business, and he realises he's got to give the tax man so many hundreds of pounds or thousands of pounds. And that money is funding this.
Yes, exactly. Spokesman of the Speaker said, and we've got this from yesterday, he's an ambassador for the House of Commons and has a responsibility to explain and promote the work of the House and to represent it at high-level, high-profile state events and inter-parliamentary conferences. Seriously? What, in St Helena?
No.
In the Cayman Islands?
Or Doha?
In Singapore? They haven't got Parliament in Doha, have they? Or at least if they have, it's not exactly democratic. I mean, I think that's what we know. Meanwhile, the Serbian Parliament, I don't know whether you saw this yesterday, this is how you get... democracy going. It's a red-blooded place, this is. I don't know if it's in Zagreb. I presume it would be. Smoke bombs, flares starting to get thrown. It's like going to one of those, Eastern European football matches, isn't it? Where they start, it's just like Dynamo Zagreb all over again. Who are they playing? Liverpool. Oh, look, get some flares going. Unbelievable. Look at that.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. It's incredible.
Should we cut back on public services? It would have livened up the House of Commons, isn't it? Let's get a voice note from James.
Good morning, Mike. I'd just like to pay tribute to Mr. Trump for what he's achieved already in the short time that he's been in. You look at Starmer, what he's achieved, Mike. Every single day he just lies. I tell you what, Mike, he lies so much now, Mike. I think that people couldn't care less now. And I was going to ask you, Mike, do you think Nigel will be the next Prime Minister? I hope to God he is. And do you think this clown's going to last? I hope to God that he's out. But you never know. And I'll tell you what, Mike, he seems to be dodging a lot of bullets lately, doesn't he? Anyway, Mike, have a great one.
James, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I mean, I do think that Nigel Farage has got a really great chance of being the next Prime Minister. I think a lot of things have to happen between now and the next election. I don't think Starmer lasts because I just don't think he's got the wherewithal to be Prime Minister of this country. And I think we've seen, people were talking last week, Theo, about, he's had a great week, perhaps the best week he's ever had. Who knew that when he went to Washington, D.C., that he would emerge from that as the sort of, the victorious, diplomat, the man that can and assuage Donald Trump. Well, now we know that that simply isn't true, that all of that craven sort of posturing and creeping and crawling to Donald Trump actually didn't really do anything other than to make Keir Starmer think he had a good in with the president, when in fact he didn't.
There's another problem. There's another problem to all of this, and that is that Keir Starmer is now spending so much time, and we know that he likes, this is a comfort zone for him. He's spending so much time negotiating with Zelensky and trying to negotiate with Donald Trump.
Yeah. He's trying to be sort of Henry Kissinger, isn't he?
But he's not concentrating on what's happening here in the UK.
No.
He's not concentrating. And we've got this changes to the workers' rights legislation.
Yes, which is a big story, by the way.
Which is a big story.
We'll cover that in a second.
It's on the front page of the
Let's
Times.
cover that after the break, because we've got to keep going with that. But also the other thing that the problem is that he's got is this coalition of the willing has literally fallen apart in the space of about 24 hours. You know, on Sunday they were all standing there with their group photo, and it was all, as I say, just as performative as what happened in the White House. You know, they were standing there shaking hands, hugging each other. You know, Zelensky was waved away in his Range Rover, and then, you know, before you could say, you know, arrivederci, Giorgia Meloni was saying you can't have any of our troops, and all of the other he didn't invite the Baltic states to the thing, so he didn't get any say-so from them. The French are trying to take over. Most of the European nations don't want to be part of this coalition of the willing, or they don't want to pay any money for it. So exactly what has been the point of the last 4 days? For Keir Starmer, he's drawn a complete blank, hasn't he?
Yes, and if you just go through his 4-point plan, and I'm just trying to find it now, and this is the test that Keir Starmer set himself. It looks at every single turn as if it's amounted to nothing. It's failed.
Yeah.
So if you put,
let's give him some marks out of 10, shall we, for his 4-point plan?
Right. Okay. You ready? Number one.
Yeah.
Any lasting peace must guarantee Ukraine's sovereignty and security.
No, fail.
It won't. It will not with this plan.
No.
I'm not sure it will.
No.
Number two, military aid to Ukraine must remain while increasing the economic pressure on Russia.
Well, that's not happening either, because military aid has been stopped.
And of course, Donald Trump has lifted. Wants to lift the sanctions against Russia.
0 for 2.
So, okay. Number three, if the peace deal is reached, Ukraine's defences must continue to be boosted.
We're not giving any more money from America, and so, you know, that I'm afraid has gone down as well. 0 for 3.
Right. Number four.
Finally.
European leaders will join forces in a coalition of the willing to devise a peace plan for Ukraine. This will be presented to the United States.
A bit too late for that, I'm afraid, because Zelensky's already beaten to the punch and gone and surrendered. So, 0 for 4, I think. Well, thank you very much for that. We are here, of course, until 10 o'clock. Theo Rushton was here till 7. We've got more to do. We'll talk about lots of things that are going wrong domestically, including the Workers' Rights Bill, including the crime bill, which has been branded a joke as well. Guess how many people are going to be going to prison extra thanks to the Keir Starmer police and crime bill? We'll tell you after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 20 minutes to 7. If you're not up yet, the sun is already up, so let's beat you to it. We've got lots to do here. Marco from Swindon says, I'm pretty sure Donald Trump wants peace in the Middle East and stability in the West because he sees the bigger threat from China. Why doesn't anyone understand his mentality, especially Starmer and the woke Europeans? And what better way to insult Trump than shaking his hand and then immediately going back to Zelensky and giving him another truckload of missiles? I mean, talk about a slap in the face. Yeah, well, again, Starmer, I think, got that completely wrong. Inviting Zelensky to Downing Street is one thing. He could probably convince Trump that, you know, this is me helping you to get the deal back on again. But then sending him off to see the King, I think that was a mistake. And promising more weaponry when, in fact, Donald Trump wants to do the exact opposite. It just wasn't sensible. But anyway, enough about that for the moment. Let's talk instead about what is going on here with this workers' rights story, because there's an awful lot of people now saying the workers' rights, on page 1 of the Times, this workers' rights is going to harm growth. Strikes are going to be more likely because apparently all you have to now do is give, 10 days notice that you're going to go on strike. So we're going to have a nice little summer of discontent by the sounds of it.
Yes, and this is Labour harming growth with new worker rights thing bill, and the point is that with Keir Starmer so focused on Ukraine, his ministers, the likes of Jonathan Reynolds in business and Angela Rayner,
the fake solicitor, as I call him. Yeah.
they're coming up with this legislation, and they're designing this legislation, and they're not. Number 10 doesn't seem to have its eye on, and the Treasury doesn't seem to have its eye on exactly what's going on. And the fear for business, we already had £40 billion of taxes, £25 billion increase in national insurance contributions for employers, and businesses are crying out. They're saying, hang on a moment, we can't continue. You can't continue to whack us over the head with punitive taxes or punitive legislation. It's going to make it more difficult. And the people who are ultimately going to suffer as a result of this, it will be the government, but businesses, but it'll be us, because it'll be less likely that people, can take up jobs. Part-time workers, are you going to take on a part-time worker as a full-time to a full-time position? No. You're not going to bother with the risk.
Not if the part-time worker is going to come in and demand the full-time rights, because that's what they'll do under this new workers' rights bill, right?
It makes it a greater risk.
And it'll be small firms that get hurt more than the bigger ones.
Yeah, and it'll be, and it makes it, Rachel Reeves says she wants economic growth, but this makes it less likely that you get economic growth, because businesses are making decisions where they're just saying, can I take the risk? Can I do a recruitment drive? And when you look at the additional burden that is going to be placed on employers with this legislation, in particularly this volatile time globally, they're just going to say it's not worth it, and that doesn't seem, that doesn't seem sensible.
No, absolutely right. And one of the big problems they've got is the sickness and disability benefits bill, which is forecast to rise from 65 billion to 100 billion by the end of this decade. Rachel Reeves has been speaking to manufacturers yesterday, saying that worklessness and the crisis of worklessness is a stain on our country. But they haven't really put forward any ideas of how they're going to get these people back to work. No. How are they going to manage that? She says that they're never going to put more pressure on public finances. She's always going to explain where the money's going to come from. But even that explanation about getting money from these frozen Russian assets is now apparently in jeopardy, because the example of Chelsea Football Club is given. That money's still sitting in a bank account. It hasn't been released. You can't get your hands on this money that they say is going to fund this defence increase, rather.
And Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer admitting, of course, that it's very complicated in international law to get hold of that money.
Yeah, well, funny enough, they didn't say that on Sunday when she was signing the cheque, did they?
No.
They just went, oh, this is all coming from Russian frozen assets. Well, it's not, actually.
No.
And I said at the time, where are you getting the money from? And everyone was going, oh, well, can't you read the tweet? It says it's coming from frozen Russian assets. And I'm like, well, yeah, but it's not, is it? And it hasn't come from there yet, and that's why I questioned it.
And then they'll have to find the money from somewhere, and they'll have to find it somewhere else. But it may all be obsolete, because given the way things are heading now with this peace deal with Donald Trump, it doesn't look as if there'll be a question for long-term defence spending, of course, and this money will go in there. But actually, is the government going to is the government going to be spending millions, billions, potentially putting British forces on the ground in Ukraine? The way things are heading, you wouldn't think so.
Well, no, I don't think that's ever going to happen, because it's going to be one of the red lines, I would imagine, as Vladimir Putin has said. He doesn't want European peacekeepers anywhere near Ukraine. I promised to give you the number of people who will be extraterrestrially locked up, right? So Keir Starmer's crime-fighting legislation. This is the Crime and Policing Bill, which apparently was going to create new offences to reduce knife crime, antisocial behaviour, shoplifting, street theft and violence against women and girls, like they like to say a lot of. Police would have extra powers to search homes without a warrant for stolen mobile phones. According to some Home Office statistics and some new surveys that have been done, it looks as though the crime-fighting legislation will only put between 13 and 55 people in prison extra. Yes. 13. 1-3, that is. I mean, you can almost count them on the fingers of 3 hands, if you had 3 hands.
You need, Mike, what you need in the middle of your desk is you need a sort of a crystal ball. It needs to be Mystic Mike.
Yeah, I don't need a crystal ball, though,
predicting which way it's all going to go so badly. Well, you predicted this. We were having this conversation 2 weeks ago.
It's not difficult to predict it, though. I mean, the thing is we've got, I actually blame the media for a lot of this stuff, right? Because a lot of the rubbish that happened after the Oval Office bust-up was people in the media asking questions like, is this really the way people should be speaking to one another? What does it matter? There's a bloody war on. You know, somebody wants to stop the war, you're going to be a bit rude. Sometimes that's what happens. If you break up a fight in a bar, you might not be doing it with the nicest possible intentions, you know. How about this one? Another one I did foresee. Morning, Mike. Just a thought, says Danny in Surrey. How's the Labour Party house building pledge going? Thought so. Yeah, because you know that Baroness Jackie Smith has already said that she's not confident there's enough people actually in the construction industry to meet the required numbers. Not enough builders, not enough plasterers, not enough, hod carriers. There's not enough of anybody.
No, and I was speaking to the boss of LinkedIn at the end of last year, and this whole net zero agenda. They don't have the skills for men and women to put solar panels on top of buildings or insulate homes. So you can have the talk, but it's looking very difficult. It's going to, because you don't have the people with the skills coming through college, getting trained up, and actually going out and doing the work that needs to be done.
I know, absolutely right. Coming up, we're going to talk about Meghan, because the show came out last night and the reviews are in, and I can tell you this, unsurprisingly, they're not actually very good. But we'll give you a flavour of that, and another little clip from Meghan at home. But it's not her home, it's somebody else's home. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 10 minutes to 7. Dan Hodges coming up in the next hour. You might be interested to know, because he's going to have some interesting things to say, I'm sure, about the way things have panned out. Keith says this: what a fantastic inspirational speech by Donald Trump overnight. Isn't it great that a leader of a country looks after the welfare of that country and its people? Keir Starmer, take note. That is the way to do it. Well, absolutely right. I mean, it was all looking a bit ridiculous now, that sort of Euro summit about nothing at all, which has led to nothing at all, really, apart from the European Union pledging to spend a load of money for a war that might soon be over. Let's talk about Meghan Markle, though, talking about wars that are soon over. According to Jane Moore, front page of the Sun today, Meg's simpering serving of telly schmaltz collapsed like a soggy souffle, which is the Sun's view of it. Jan Moore in the Mail, entry-level hosting for people who need a recipe for ice cubes. Her stealth wealth wardrobe is revealed. It's worth 130,000 quid. I mean, the whole business of this is so ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, it came out last night on Netflix, and people will say, why are you giving it so much attention? Well, because she is married to an heir to the throne of this country. Whether we like it or not, Prince Harry is still, you know, technically within a sort of reach of becoming king at one point.
Yes, and I think the other part of it is that, you know, Meghan Markle is presenting herself as an ordinary person, but this is not an ordinary series.
And then it's like, please don't call me Meghan Markle because my name is Sussex now. Yeah. And in fact, I think we've got a clip that says that. Have we got that clip? Let's have a look.
I don't think anyone in the world knows that Meghan Markle has eaten Jack in the Box and loves it.
It's so funny, too, that you keep saying Meghan Markle. You know I'm Sussex now. You have kids and you go, no, I share my name with my children.
Yes.
And that feels so, I didn't know how meaningful it would be to me, but it just means so much to go, this is our family name.
I thought it was Harry Wales, actually. Yeah. And then they took Sussex as a title, didn't they?
She spent 6 hours in Sussex.
Yeah, that's not too long. 6 hours too many, in my view. You know, I go to Sussex every weekend. I don't want her there.
Carol Midgley has quite an interesting line. In one episode, after she'd put about 50 quid's worth of berries on a plate and decked out a summer house like it's an explosion in a Cath Kidston warehouse, she tells her guest, Mindy Kaling, that it's possible to create this kind of magic, quote, on a budget. Here, I'm afraid, I laughed out loud. Tone-deaf klaxon required.
Oh, it really is ludicrous. I mean, like, we had that yesterday, this ridiculous idea that you could get up in the morning, you know, you've got kids, and you could make them this kind of, you know, rainbow of fruit, which nobody wants. Children don't want to eat fruit in the morning, you know, they want to eat cereal. You can give them an apple or something, but you don't give them a rainbow display of blueberries and raspberries and strawberries, do you?
I was having a chat with a friend of mine who's got a young kid, and I was saying, you know, he's saying, oh, it's tea time. I've got to sort dinner. I said, can you just put a potato waffle in the toaster?
Yeah. Right. Fish fingers. Yeah. Always goes down well. Yeah, absolutely right.
Ping. Give it to them.
And then Jan Moore inside the Mail, pictures of her, because Harry makes a very short appearance apparently in this series, holding a glass of Bucks Fizz. You know, oh, how appropriate. And the headline says, it all seems like a bowl of consomme, strained and thin. Does she even enjoy it herself? Grab your truffled popcorn, pour yourself a honey tea spiced with cayenne pepper, and crack open the personally monogrammed sick bags. With love, Meghan. I mean, I don't know. I can't imagine who would watch it actually like with anything other than a completely jaundiced sense, you know. But I've got from the Times, because they've done some of the great quotes from it, and this is one of the things that she says about how to be a hostess with the mostest. The joy of hostessing for me is surprising people with moments that let them know I was really thinking of their whole experience. I mean, it's just like when you invite people to your house, right? And then this one, her own hard graft. My right arm is so strong from today, my poor little neglected left arm, what am I going to do? Right. I mean, make your own joke there, I suppose. And then Meghan's jam. My kids will now connect coming home from school and smelling sweetness that wafts through the house when you are slow cooking fruit. Here she is, Mum's making preserves again.
Right.
Oh my God.
Nobody lives.
What's she talking about? I mean, really?
It's a lifestyle show?
Yeah. Right. For people with millions and millions of dollars and 16 toilets and 9 bedrooms and a big house in Montecito, California. with some chickens
nothing
in
like
the
the
garden.
lifestyle that.
No, and also the kitchen that she uses is not even in her house. And as I think it was Carol Midgley who pointed out, she's probably got a bigger house than that, and the real kitchen is probably even bigger than that.
A lot of these houses have 2 kitchens.
Yeah.
So they have a kitchen where you.
Ed Miliband could live there then. He likes 2 kitchens.
You have a kitchen where the Americans they call it a chef's kitchen. So it's a kitchen where you have your staff doing the cooking.
That's right.
And then there's a kitchen where you sort of waft around with for 50 quid a bowl of fruit. Yeah.
Oh my God. Let's talk about talking of food. Slightly more down to earth prices. Greggs on page 11 of the Sun. Fat jabs batter Greggs. They're basically saying that people are taking so much Ozempic and various different fat jabs that they are not eating the portion sizes that Greggs are giving them. So they're thinking of reducing the portion sizes in order to cater for them. This is quite a weird story.
Yeah, I thought the Greggs portions were okay. I quite like their pasties.
Well, yeah.
So they're going to make them smaller pasties?
Because, there's another pasty company that's very, very sort of often seen at railway stations in London, and their pasties are huge.
Yeah.
And you never want one, really, because it's too big. But the Greggs ones are quite small.
I always thought Greggs had it about right, but apparently Ozempic means that people have smaller appetites, and therefore Greggs needs to portion accordingly. I just hope that maybe they have 2 sizes of chicken bake or steak bake, or the one I like is the sausage and bean and cheese melt.
Do you like that? I'm a steak bake person myself.
Yeah.
Some people love sausage rolls.
Yeah, and the pizzas are quite good.
Yeah,
but it's very difficult. There's one in Westminster when I go to work in Parliament, and you walk in. I find it very difficult to get through the barrier at Westminster Tube Station without popping into Greggs.
Well, when we used to go down to as we used to call it, the Tent of Shame, during that whole period of Brexit 2019, we would go through the barrier and straight into Greggs, sausage rolls, coffees, off to the tent on College Green. Couldn't go without it.
No, and it's not good for one's cholesterol, but it's look, if it works for them reducing the portion sizes, just keep the normal sizes available. That's all I'd say. They've
also apparently changed some options in order to cater for a bigger demand for more protein and chicken, which could also be linked to these weight loss jabs, apparently. So they've already added popcorn, chicken and goujons with more poultry-based snacks on the way. I'm not liking it. Don't change what's already working,
You go in there for the pasties or stretch the pizza.
Once you start branching out too much and suddenly you're doing some consommé. Oh, shall we have another? We've got another clip of Meghan messing up a dish. Let's do this one. See what this is about.
I don't think anyone in the world knows that Meghan Markle has eaten Jack in the Box and loves it.
It's so funny, too, that you keep saying Meghan Markle. I'm Sussex now. You have kids, and you go, no, I share my name with my children.
Yes.
And that's the piece that I think would feel stressful, the flipping over.
The whole thing is so stressful.
Yes.
So put this on top.
Okay. It doesn't have to be such a hefty plate, right? But I think if you have a plate this large, this is a 2-man job.
And then on the count of 3, I'm going to flip it over and we can hold on to it together.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Oh, teamwork makes the dream work. No. This way. 1, 2, 3. Okay, ready?
I think it's...
Flip, don't worry. But it's one piece. Oh, you know what? Right there. Hold on. We use these guys. We use these guys. And it won't break.
Your mom would be so proud.
I mean, I'm sorry. These are people that haven't got enough to do.
What is it? It looks...
I don't know what it was.
It's like a giant pancake.
It looks like a sort of... it might have been some kind of frittata or something. But, if you make it right, you can just scoop it out of the pan. You don't have to turn it over and make it, upside down cake. That's probably a deliberate mistake, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that they can have something to talk about. Oh, didn't we laugh? We had such a good laugh. It was so much fun. Goodness gracious me. Anyway, listen, Theo, thank you very much indeed. Theo Osherwood is off. We're here for the next 3 hours. We've got plenty to talk about. Dan Hodges coming up. We'll be listening to him, how he managed to get it wrong. Well, once again, I got it right. Donald Trump straddles the universe. He's got Vladimir Zelensky offering to make a peace deal. He's signing the minerals deal. Keir Starmer looks like an idiot. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. I'm Mike Graham.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public is not being told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike in...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham. The sun is up. It's looking a bit hazy again. It was really a beautiful afternoon yesterday. It got to be 15, 16 degrees. You know, it's still a bit cold in the mornings, but, you know, there's definitely a smell of spring in the air. You can hardly taste it, but it's definitely there. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Coming up in this hour, we are joined by Dan Hodges from the Mail on Sunday. He and I have been on and off on Twitter pretty much all over the last 4 or 5 days. I came in yesterday to say there'd been some extraordinary events going on, and it really has been an extraordinary few days. But last night, Donald Trump got up, of course, in Congress to make the longest speech that's ever been made to Congress, 1 hour and 40 minutes, in which he basically declared that Volodymyr Zelensky was indeed ready to sign the minerals deal. Volodymyr Zelensky, having written a letter to Donald Trump, was very much ready for peace in Ukraine, and very much ready to sit down at the table with the Russians, very much ready to do all the things that he looked like he wasn't ready to do last Friday in the Oval Office. So the long game, as I always say to people, is what Donald Trump is involved in. I'm sure Dan will disagree with me, but you have to admit that Keir Starmer, for all of his huffing and puffing and arranging for Volodymyr Zelensky to come to Downing Street, arranging for some people to cheer when he gave him a hug, arranging for a load of European leaders to come and tell him that they wanted to join a coalition of the willing, arranging for all sorts of telephone calls to be had between him and Zelensky, between him and Trump. He now looks as if he's a little boy lost, standing in a field after the school trip left him behind when the bus went back into town. That's how it looks to me. Let's hear from Donald Trump on the favourite subject of this very programme. It is, of course, common sense.
Past 6 weeks, I have signed nearly 100 executive orders and taken more than 400 executive actions, a record, to restore common sense, safety, optimism, and wealth all across our wonderful land. The people elected me to do the job, and I'm doing it.
can't really argue with that, really, can you? We'll be talking about a great many things, of course, including the migrants of the day. This is today, and a couple from El Salvador who apparently met in this country, met in El Salvador. One of them came to this country. They can't go back to El Salvador because they come from rival gangs. If they go back to El Salvador, one of the gangs might kill one of the other members. It's quite a complicated story, but it's the usual rules. Right to home life from the ECHR. Also, the Labour crime bill is a joke. Apparently, the number of people that are going to lock up extra from all of these new rules and laws that have been brought in is around about 15. Something like that. Absolutely incredible. Rachel Reeves, meanwhile, is getting ready to cut public spending, and it's going to be an absolute bloodbath out there. So Keir Starmer's brief flirtation with popularity has already come to an end. Thank you very much indeed. Good night. It's 5 minutes past 7. It's Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Can we get a voice note from Teresa on Lindsay Hoyle?
Morning, Mike. Just ringing to talk about these jollies around the world. Interestingly, in the UK, they can all do their Teams calls, etc., to the office in London without problem. But if they go to some luxury destination in the world, they actually need to visit. Disgusting. Thank you very much.
I know, it's all right for some, isn't it? Absolutely right. Good morning, says Rachel. What a night. I go to bed for a few hours and it looks like I've missed loads. Looking forward to the show. By the way, can I still get a few bumper stickers for the family? Well, I don't know about a few, Rachel, because we've run out of them. We've got more coming in, which we'll be getting in very, very soon. And as soon as we get those, we'll give you a place that you can send an email to request at the very least one. I'm not sure if we can give out loads because so many people want them. You know, there's basically been a run on them. Dan Hodges knows about that. They had a run on the Mail on Sunday last week when they put on that headline that Trump should be banned from coming to see the King. Dan, very good morning to you.
Morning.
So, I mean, you know, you'd have to say another extraordinary 24 hours, really. Volodymyr Zelensky sent a letter yesterday afternoon to Donald Trump to say that he's ready to sit down and do the minerals deal. He's ready to sit down and talk peace. He's ready to bring an end to the war. All of the things that I suppose you could say that Trump wanted him to do. So that's a plus in the end. Keir Starmer, I think, is left looking a little silly, isn't he? He's been sort of hung out to dry to some extent.
Well, I wouldn't say he's necessarily left looking silly. I mean, as you said, there's so much been going on. I mean, obviously, you know, we've had Starmer's visit, and then, you know, the incredible and frankly disgusting scenes we saw in the Oval Office. I mean, where I will agree with you is I do think Keir Starmer has got a major problem now, and the major problem we saw just a couple of days ago, where, you know, Keir Starmer stood up in the House of Commons, talked about his meeting with Trump, talked about, and I think this is the crucial point, talked about how Trump was a reliable ally who he and the country and Europe could do business with, and then obviously Trump, you know, pulled the rug out from under him by saying he was pulling support for Ukraine. Right. And I think the fundamental problem is if you pull away and strip away all the rhetoric and sort of mayhem of the last week, the fundamental point now is Trump is not a reliable ally. The United States are not a reliable ally. This is not the United States that governments of all persuasions have been used to working with over the last 40, 50, 60 years. And
although many of those governments, of course, were very close to Vladimir Putin, which is one of the things that I've been pointing out to people, that, you know, the kind of derangement around the Trump administration is quite clear, because people in the media in particular, and I don't count you as a deranged person, Dan, because I think you've always been pretty balanced. But the bottom line is that some people will just want to hate everything that Donald Trump does because he's Donald Trump. You know, I've been seeing pictures of George Bush showing Vladimir Putin around his ranch in Texas. I've seen pictures of, you know, Hillary Clinton laughing with Sergei Lavrov, you know, as they look at a piece of paper. You know, there's plenty of pictures you can find of all past American presidents cozying up to the Russians.
No, but I think I think that's of a similar nature. Is absolutely right and proper that after the fall of the Berlin Wall, we began a process of proper, if you like, détente and rapprochement and building relations with Russia and the former Soviet Union. The problem is, though, Putin has made that impossible, because Putin has demonstrated in a range of ways, obviously not least, poisoning people on the streets of the United Kingdom with chemical weapons, that he is simply not somebody you can trust or do business with. And you're absolutely right. But the nature of the relationship with Putin has obviously changed over the years, and crucially changed when he invaded Ukraine. And the problem is, if you like, that unreliability that we saw with Putin is now being matched by Donald Trump. I mean, not just Donald Trump, but the entire Trump administration. So we saw it yesterday, obviously, with J.D. Vance going out and, basically rubbishing the memory of British soldiers who had fallen, other European soldiers.
Well, he wasn't really, was he? I mean, that's another one. I mean, you mentioned the disgusting behaviour that happened on Friday. I think we're so hung up now, again, and I think this is very similar to what people do when they don't like Donald Trump. You make something out of it. You make out that it's a terrible thing. The fact is the performative aspect of what happened last Friday in the Oval Office has led to the fact that Zelensky has now written a letter saying he's willing to compromise and he's willing to come to the table. All of these things, as I said to you last week, have an end point. And I think if you go a bit too early, you miss the point of what is being said and why it's being said.
No, I understand that, and I've always agreed with you that the criticism, the concept of Trump derangement syndrome is very real, and we saw it a little bit yesterday with the speech where the Democrats, again, frankly, disgraced themselves and showed them to understand even the basics of how to be an opposition party. But the point about this in relation to Trump is this is not Trump derangement syndrome in the sense of people reacting to perceived things. There is a clear pattern now that we've seen from Trump, and people are now reacting to his actions. He ambushed Zelensky, threw him out of the White House, ostensibly because he wasn't wearing a suit and because of his manner and demeanour and his failure to say thank you enough.
Well, it wasn't just that, though, was it? I mean, again, you're going for the simple sort of, ridiculous stuff. The real reason it was that they fell out was because he started to try and lecture them about why they shouldn't be dealing with Putin in any form of diplomacy whatsoever. That was what annoyed them. It wasn't because he wasn't wearing a suit.
I mean, you can take that view. We can have a disagreement about what he said.
Well, that's what they took exception to.
I mean, the man's country and citizens are currently being bombed, murdered, raped, tortured.
But he's not. But he hasn't taken. But you've taken offence on his behalf, and he hasn't taken offence. So what's that all about?
Who hasn't taken offence?
Zelensky.
Well, you just told me Zelensky was saying this is what Zelensky was saying in the White House to Trump and Vance, which is why he was thrown out. And I'm explaining that's why he was saying it.
But what I'm saying is that you're going on about how terrible it all was that they treated him like that. He doesn't care. He's coming to the table. He wants peace. He doesn't care about the niceties of diplomacy. He's not interested in whether they treated him well or not. He's interested in getting a fair deal for his country. That's what he wants. Whereas everybody in, London and Paris and Luxembourg wants to sort of clutch their pearls and go, oh, isn't that horrible man Donald Trump being horrible?
Well, no, I completely agree but I completely agree with you on that. But I'm just pointing out the facts of what happened. And as a result of that, and as a result of what he said in the White House, Trump and Vance belittled him and then threw him out. And we saw that.
I don't think they belittled him. They just didn't like the fact that he was trying to lecture them, I think.
Look, if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are such snowflakes, they can't...
They're not snowflakes. They're playing a game, Dan. Do you not get it? It's a game of chess, right? They did what they did because they knew that the end result would be him coming back. That's what they did.
Okay, but
and that's what's happened, and that's therefore why they're successful.
Okay, but Mike, we hear this a lot. I mean, again, there's the 4D chess, but you can't have it both ways. Were they playing chess with him, or did they get upset with what he was saying and throw him out?
I don't think Trump gets upset with people. I mean, you can take Piers Morgan's word.
Okay, fine.
Piers Morgan was on Laura Kuenssberg on Sunday. He said, look, I've had blazing rows with Trump. It's what he does. A lot of the time he does it for effect. A lot of the time he does it to gauge a reaction. A lot of time he does it because he wants something else.
Perfect. So let's take that argument. Fine, he wasn't upset. He threw Zelensky out and wrecked the signing of the minerals deal, as you say, for effect.
No, he didn't, because Zelensky just said he's going to sign it. So how's he wrecked it?
Okay. Come on, Mike. Which one? What?
Well, you have to look at the end. You're the guy, Dan, that watches the start of a marathon and points to somebody and goes, well, he's never going to win it, is he? Mike, it's a marathon.
I'm trying to understand. On the one hand, you're saying to me, Trump didn't get upset. Fine. So if Trump didn't get upset, he purposely threw him out.
Yeah.
Fine. So you agreed on that, right? So he purposely threw Zelensky out.
Well, I don't know if he threw him out, but I'll take your word for it. I don't know how you know that, but there you go.
Well, why did Zelensky leave?
Well, maybe he decided to walk out. I have no idea. But the point is that if you look at where we... But again, you're arguing about something that happened so long ago in the political cycle that we've already moved about 3 steps ahead.
Fine. I'm just trying to give you an example of why people are reacting to Trump in the way he did.
No, I know exactly why people react to Trump in the way that they do, because they've got a crazed hatred of him that they can't put to one side and actually analyse it. I find myself to be one of the few people in this country who predicted that this would all work. And here it is, working.
Well, you're saying it's working. I mean, let's wait and see.
Well, I said let's wait and see last week, right? When you said this is all terrible, this is all going horribly wrong, and Keir Starmer's going to be the saviour of the world. And it now turns out, actually, Zelensky's ready to do the deal. He's going to sign the minerals deal, and he's also going to sign some other kind of pledge that he wants to end the war. We're already halfway there.
Since last week, we had Zelensky turning up in the White House to sign the minerals deal. He either walked out or was thrown out.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely...
So that's ancient history, right? Next.
Fine. So I don't think anyone would regard that as a positive. We've had the US defense...
Of course it's a positive, because now he's back.
It was a positive... So sorry, you think the scenes we saw in the White House on Friday...
I don't care about the scenes in the White House. I honestly couldn't care less how they speak to each other. I mean, have you never had an argument with anyone?
Yeah, I haven't had an argument.
Well, I mean, I've had much worse arguments with people than that.
Deal to potentially say...
Yeah, but why should everybody behave? But why should everybody behave the way you want them to behave?
Mike, can I just make this broader point? The broader point I'm making is, we saw what happened in the White House. You may think it doesn't matter. I think it does matter. We've had the US Defense Secretary saying that he is now pausing cyber attacks on Russia, even though Russia is cyber attacking us and the United States. We've had a situation where the vital aid being sent to Ukraine, that Ukraine needs to defend itself, has now been paused by the United States. And we had J.D. Vance yesterday making his comments and undermining, this was a side issue which people missed, deliberately undermining and directly undermining Keir Starmer and Macron's attempt to get other EU countries to provide a security backstop for Ukraine. Now, these are all tangible things the American administration, Trump and Vance, are doing. This is not Trump derangement syndrome. People aren't making this sort of stuff up. People aren't making up the fact that Trump is now pivoting towards Russia, is undermining Ukraine.
I mean, listen, you just said wait and see, right? Now, why don't you take a bit of that advice and wait and see? I've been saying this for 2 weeks now, right? I read a piece by William Hague in the Times yesterday. Now, I'm not normally somebody that would even read what William Hague has to say, but he put this into a very good perspective, and I think it's a good way of looking at it. Trump is not about destabilising Europe. He's not about destabilising NATO. He's not about, being friends with Russia and not being friends with Ukraine. This whole project that Trump is involved in is about saving money, right? It's all about going through public spending, looking at what's been happening in some of these departments of state and slashing and burning because people are sick to death of the ridiculous expense. He sees Ukraine as a ridiculous expense. It's all about the money for him. It is not about, annexing parts of Europe or rebuilding the New World Order or anything like that. It's purely and simply about money. And I think if you look at it like that, then everything makes a lot more sense.
Oh, well, great. OK, well, it may be about money to Donald Trump, but it's not about money to...
No, it's about money to the American taxpayer.
And frankly, it's not just about money for us who are facing this threat from Vlad.
You are capable of having a conversation on different levels. What I'm saying is, I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm saying the analysis makes it an interesting perspective to look at it from, because it means that instead of hating Donald Trump because he's trying to betray Ukraine, look at it through a different lens.
But this is the point. I mean, you just said it. People are capable of having a conversation on different levels. The whole point about Trump and Trump's approach is he's not capable of having a conversation.
Of course he is.
Well, he's having one conversation.
You just don't like anything that he does, do you? And is there anything that he's done that you think has been positive? Do you think anything that he's done has been positive? In relation to this? Yeah.
Has he done anything that's positive?
Yes.
Well, we've finally got a
yes or no.
Sorry?
A simple yes or no.
I'll tell you what I think he's done that's positive. He's finally got Zelensky into the White House. That was undoubtedly a positive. He got Zelensky into the White House.
And then he threw him out.
And then he thank you, exactly.
Yeah,
and then he threw him out.
But more important than that, Dan, is that he's now got him to agree to sitting down and to talking about terms of a ceasefire
what do you think
and of peace.
At the White House on Friday? Do you think he was there on a tour?
No, he was there to sign the minerals deal, which he didn't get to
do. He got him into the White House. Zelensky was there prepared to sign.
No, Zelensky asked to go to the White House to sign the minerals deal. That's the way round it was.
No, Donald Trump invited him to the White House to sign the minerals deal.
After he said, "Can I come to the White House?" He invited him. I mean, this is ridiculous. You don't have to argue about the
White House. We agreed that Zelensky was in.
Oh yeah, we can definitely agree he was in the White House.
He agreed he was there to talk and negotiate. And we there he's agreed to sign the mineral deal. At which point he was thrown out.
Yeah, because he wasn't prepared to do what Trump wanted him to do. Now he is prepared to do.
That's exactly the point. What does Trump want him to do? Trump basically wants him. He was prepared to sign the mineral deal.
Yeah,
All he said was, "Sorry, I'm sorry. Just be careful with Putin. Don't trust him."
No, but that wasn't the tone of his. That wasn't the tone. Look, if somebody walked into your office at the Mail on Sunday and started telling you how to write your column, right? You might have a slightly different approach to them than if they were somebody who was a boss of yours saying it, right?
People tell me how to write my column every single day. That's part of life. Again, if Trump is such a snowflake...
He's the President of the United States, Dan. I'm sure your column is very important to you, but you're not the President of the United States of America. What you don't need is some tin pot character coming over from Ukraine to tell you how you should be negotiating a deal.
We're getting somewhere.
That's his view.
That's it.
That's his view. Yeah, because he's the President of the United States. Look, you've just seen, Dan. Hang on a minute.
Now we're getting somewhere.
No, we're not. No, wait. You're not getting somewhere. The fact is, if you think that Vladimir Zelensky and Donald Trump are equal in the world of politics or in the world of military equipment or anything else, you've got it wrong. And so has Zelensky, if that's what he thinks. I'm afraid those are the rules. Everybody knows, even Keir Starmer, who now looks like an idiot, says that you can't do anything in Europe without Donald Trump.
Well,
right?
no one... No one has disputed that Vladimir Zelensky's military power and might and economic muscle are not the same as Donald Trump's. But you absolutely put your finger on it. He regards Zelensky as some tin pot character.
Yeah, he does.
The rest of the world, me included, regards Zelensky as someone who's a very brave man whose country...
Not everybody actually does, Dan. I mean, maybe everybody in the Westminster bubble.
Not everybody.
There's an awful lot of people that watch and listen to this show who don't believe that.
No, absolutely. When we've seen it last week. There are a lot of quislings and
Trump. No, they're quislings if they don't agree with Vladimir Zelensky is a hero of the war.
A lot of them are. A lot of them are. A lot of them are people who
well, I'm not a quisling.
I haven't said you are. I'm just saying a lot of people are promoting Putin's agenda. A lot of people...
No, they're not. A lot of people just don't want to be... This again is coming back to what Donald Trump means when he says we're not throwing any more money at Ukraine, because the taxpayers of the United States of America voted him into power to stop the waste of money. And you can tell the difference between Europe and the United States of America, because the European Union, thanks to old Ursula von der Leyen, who is an appointed commissioner of the European Union, she's not even elected, wants to spend £800 billion of European money by sending it to a place where the leader of the country actually wants peace. So what's that all about? She's not listening. She's not listening to her people. Giorgia Meloni is listening, and she's not sending any troops.
No, absolutely. But as Keir Starmer rightly said, different countries will send different levels of support.
Well, what's happened to the coalition of the willing?
No, that's a good point. That is currently being developed, and that is
it's fallen apart.
How has it fallen apart?
Well, who's in it? Who's in the coalition of the willing?
No, that's a different point.
Who's
you said it's fallen apart, and you said no. This is an issue that I agree with you on, and as I've said in relation to Keir Starmer, I think this is an issue for him. He has sort of...
He's got a coalition of the unwilling, is what he's got.
Now, the one thing we do know now, thanks to that idiot J.D. Vance, is we know from his tweets yesterday...
I thought you didn't like people calling people names.
When did I say that?
Well, you said that here we go. You've given that impression, shall we say? You didn't have to say it.
I'm as happy to call people names as the next man be called names, as you well know. But the reality is, thanks to that idiot J.D. Vance yesterday, we now know in which he openly criticised in his tweet those European countries that are, and he said...
Well, you don't know which countries you criticise, because he said he didn't criticise the UK. He certainly didn't criticise the UK or France.
He basically criticised us, France and everyone.
No,
he
didn't. He didn't criticise. He specifically said, I did not mention the UK or France. But, you know, of course...
Yeah, but then he wouldn't say who he
decided to run with the fact that he's a horrible man, therefore he must have meant Britain and France, and then you've wound up a load of military people to have a go at him, and some papers like the Daily Express and the Mirror, who are owned by the same outfit, seem to think that that's a good way to operate. But, I mean, that's as untruthful as anything that would come out of any Trump-supporting organisation.
Well, I think that's... I think if you look at every paper this morning, every paper has...
Yeah, but it doesn't make it true, Dan. I've been in the newspaper business a long time. I know how it works, OK? You know, you've stumped up a row which is not really a row.
Well, no one stumped up a row. They're his comments. He's a grown man.
Yeah, but you've made the reaction to those comments a row, which they didn't need to be.
I made the reaction to comment to
you
the row.
Collectively as the journalists of this world who hate Donald Trump. Yes.
Oh, I see. All right then. So the fact there is universal condemnation of
for example, did you write about the horrible situation when Joe Biden shouted at Vladimir Zelensky? I don't remember reading that.
I don't actually remember that happening. I've got to be completely honest.
Well, it did happen. And in fact, if you look back through Mail Online over the weekend, you'll find exactly when it happened.
OK, fine. Well,
but you didn't write about that because apparently that wasn't disgusting.
Well, I'm not entirely sure you're saying I haven't ever been critical of Joe Biden.
Well, I'm just saying that, you know, isn't it funny how everybody reacts to Donald Trump being horrible, but they don't react to Joe Biden being horrible? Is there a reason for that? Yeah, could be that he's a Democrat.
Mike, I'm really sorry. Yeah, we are going to react to Donald Trump being horrible. I know that offends you. I know that offends
a lot. It doesn't offend me. I don't care. Listen, I don't take offence, Dan.
There's this attitude. Oh no, poor Donald, please don't.
No, I don't take offence, Dan. I do this. Listen, I argue for a living.
Ukraine, and he's siding with Vladimir Putin. I and others are going to criticise him, and you're going to have to accept this.
You said wait and see, Dan. Beginning of this conversation.
Arrangement syndrome. Donald Trump is going to get criticised, Mike. I'm really sorry.
I don't mind that.
He's a hero of yours. I know he's a hero of lots of people who watch this.
I don't have heroes.
He's going to get criticised.
No,
he's going to get criticised.
I don't have heroes, Dan. Dan, I don't have heroes. I don't have political allegiance. I don't have a political affiliation. Unlike you, hang on. Unlike you, so I can actually operate in a free zone. I'm not paying money to any political party. I don't vote for political parties. I've got no interest in political parties. I'm not a cult of personality type of person. You know, I'm not always looking for a reason to praise Keir Starmer or to bury him. He manages to do that himself, OK? So that's my job. So you don't have to come at me and pretend to me that I take offence at anything, because I really don't.
I mean, Mike, with respect, you're coming with me again and again with this argument. You just did it then. You claimed criticism from me and other journalists of Donald Trump was part of an agenda, and it's not.
Well, it is.
Donald Trump is doing things that need condemnation. J.D. Vance is doing things that need condemnation.
You can condemn them, but why don't you condemn everybody in the same way?
If people don't like that, I'm very, very sorry.
I didn't say I didn't like it.
A lot of people see Donald Trump as a hero. They see because well, fine, good, and neither do I. But the reality is he's going to get criticised.
Yeah, well, I'm very happy for that. Listen, Dan, listen, I'm holding you to account because you criticise him. That's fair enough. I don't care if you criticise him, but you didn't criticise Biden when he did the same thing. That's my point. But we'll have to leave it there because we can't do this all day, as much as I'd like to. It's been great. Just remember your own words, and I'll play them back to you next time. Wait and see, because that's what you have to do with Donald Trump. We'll see you soon. Let's get a voice note from Brian.
Mike from Southend here, just listening to your show with Dan Hodges on. What is up with this man? You know, you're right, he's got Trump deranged syndrome. You know, he's going on about all the Democrats letting themselves down and all that with the heckling and all that. He didn't say Labour let themselves down, did he? When they were heckling the Conservatives all the time, they were always heckling, or the treatment to Farage by Labour and other MPs. He just don't see two sides. You know, he reckons he's impartial, but he never sees the other side. It's always anti-Trump, anti-Trump.
I'm afraid that's true. We have run massively over, though, with Dan, I'm afraid, even though he's trying to desperately tell me that he doesn't have an agenda against Donald Trump. Pull the other one. We'll see how this is going coming up. But coming up to very nearly 7:30, we're going to speak to the chair of the Republican Party in Los Angeles, California, to find out what she makes of what happened last night in Congress with Donald Trump.
You know the production crew have produced absolutely everything.
Yeah.
The list of friends, there's a Korean cook who comes in who was asked to be part of the programme. And I may be wrong, but he looked as if it was the last place he actually ended up wanting to be at.
But also, we're told there's a load of celebrity friends. As far as I can tell, there's sort of people like her makeup artist and some people who apparently we're supposed to have heard of, but we haven't actually heard of. I'm not entirely sure she has got celebrity friends, or indeed friends.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:32. I'm Mike Graham. We are running very late, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to Dan Hodges, so we'll try and speed things up a little bit. Let's speak now to Roxanne Hoge, who's chair of the Republican Party in Los Angeles. Roxanne, very good morning to you.
Morning, and thanks for having me again.
Yeah, not at all. Thanks for coming on. Sorry to keep you waiting. We were getting into a bit of a row with somebody suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, but don't worry. Let's play a little bit of what happened last night. Trump on weaponizing government.
We've ended weaponized government where, as an example, a sitting president is allowed to viciously prosecute his political opponent, like me. How did that work out? Not too good. Not too good.
There's an awful lot of noise being generated there. I mean, he's getting on with the job 6 weeks in. You can't really argue with that, can you?
No, well, I can't, but apparently the Democrat Party can. Unfortunately for the Democrat Party that was seated in the chamber, their constituents are not agreeing with them. An overwhelming majority of people approved of Donald Trump's speech and his performance.
Yeah, because he is a very, very charismatic individual. I mean, when you compare him to Joe Biden, you just think back, you know, a couple of short months ago when you would see Joe Biden making speeches and you'd wonder whether he'd be able to remember what he was saying, or you remember whether he was walking off to the left of the stage, to the right of the stage. It's a real breath of fresh air, isn't it?
Well, he is alive, and for that we are very grateful. The main thing is that Biden was just a figurehead and a puppet for people who really ran things behind the scenes, and now we know that we have an actual chief executive officer, commander-in-chief, and it is a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
Really lovely.
And I mean, as far as this, the main event, which I guess is not even the whole settlement of the Russia-Ukraine war, but it's more about kind of clearing out government waste. I mean, that's an extraordinary job that he's taken on, and he seems to be achieving some success with it.
It's astounding that no one has managed to do it before. Companies do zero-based budgeting all the time, but the government never has. And to have them finally actually get the bull by the horns is really exciting for this American taxpayer who often is contributing an awful lot of money to things that just don't make any sense.
Yeah, exactly. Let's have a look at what he had to say about the Social Security fraud.
The media and our friends in the Democrat Party kept saying we needed new legislation, we must have legislation to secure the border. But it turned out that all we really needed was a new president. But a lot of money is paid out to people because it just keeps getting paid and nobody does, and it really hurts Social Security and hurts our country. 1.3 million people from ages 150 to 159, and over 130,000 people, according to the Social Security databases, are age over 160 years old. We have a healthier country than I thought, Bobby.
Robert Kennedy there. I mean, this is the thing. It's incredible, isn't it? Somebody said to me, it's a bit like one of those Apple subscriptions that you forgot that you had, and you keep paying $2.99 every month for the rest of your life because you can't be bothered cancelling it. I mean, that's what's going on, except to the tune of billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, $1 million here, $47 million there. Sooner or later, you're talking about real money, and that's the old quote. What's amazing is that the Democrats try to defend the number of 100-year-old plus people on Social Security by saying that that's a quirk of the programming. It's not really true. Social Security is a system based on age. The fact that anyone with an unverified age is in the system is an indictment by itself.
Yes, exactly right. And the money's disappearing. It's going somewhere, and that's the problem, is where is it going? And obviously the country is going to benefit massively if it can be stopped.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, great stuff. Roxanne, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Roxanne Hoge there, chair of the Republican Party in Los Angeles, talking about Donald Trump's speech last night, made in the early hours of the morning, our time. We'll be bringing you more on it, of course, throughout the course of the day. The problem for nearly all the European politicians, says Frank in Bromley, is that they don't believe Trump will actually fulfil the policies he promised the American people. It's just so un-European. Well, I think the problem for all of them is that, as J.D. Vance called them when he said that at the Munich Security Conference, I'm afraid you're all guilty of ruining your own countries by not building enough defence mechanisms, by allowing illegal migration to completely ruin Western Europe, by not spending money on the right things and letting wokeism take over and spending money on the wrong things. And that's why Ursula von der Leyen, that you just saw sitting there with J.D. Vance, is now pledging £800 billion pounds to Ukraine to keep a war going. Even Volodymyr Zelensky doesn't want to keep going anymore. For heaven's sake, it's pretty obvious what's going on, isn't it? America's doing what its voters wanted, Europe isn't. It's as simple as that. 7:38.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:40. Keith says this: 6 weeks ago, even talk of a ceasefire wasn't around. Now it's on the table, and that was a fantastic speech by Donald Trump. Stuart says, good morning, Mike. The EU and Labour are a bunch of planks, and President Trump and Putin know this, so they simply ignore them in order to make some progress regarding ending the war. Well, I think, as I've been saying for the best part of the last week, you know, people want to see an end to it. Certainly they want to see an end to the amounts of money that are being spent on it, because it is quite prodigious and quite unaffordable. And from the American point of view, and the European point of view, I think that should be exactly what the driving force of it all is. Let's speak now, though, to Baroness Ros Altman, crossbench peer, former pensions minister, of course, because not only is money at the very heart of many conversations at the top of government, it should be also very much at the top of many conversations about state pensions, about the benefits bill. We're talking about £100 billion now of benefits being paid out before the end of this decade to people on sickness benefits, which is simply just unaffordable. You know, the pension system is in a terrible state, as is welfare. Baroness Ross, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Nice to talk to you. I mean,
lovely to be here.
Basically, we seem to have a great big, horrible kind of, you know, I don't want to call it a sort of a boil that's about to burst, but you know, the idea for me is that, you know, the desecration of the welfare system in this country has been going on for so long that something is about to give, isn't it?
Well, a lot of people are saying that. Certainly the level of generosity of some of the benefits in this country, or the ease with which you can get them, is attracting people to come here from abroad, and also the fact that you can work without an ID card, for example, is another element of this. But as far as the actual state pension is concerned for British pensioners, it's one of the lowest in the developed world. So, you know, although it is a lot of money because it's a lot of people, we're talking 11, 12 million people, the actual amount of the basic new state pension, before you talk about all the extra benefits that go on top of that, is not terribly generous. And that's certainly an issue that a lot of people overlook. Nevertheless, of course, it's a large amount of money, and the government is trying to control spending by increasing the state pension age. My fear on that is that a lot of people aren't healthy enough to work until an ever-rising age, and there's big disparities between those who have had very hard physical manual labour lives, for example, and are seriously not well in their 60s or even in their late 50s, and then those who are at the top of the tree who have very healthy lives until at least their early 70s.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's not as much, I suppose, you know, sort of mechanical jobs or factory jobs or even, you know, what you might call blue-collar industrial jobs as there used to be. Yeah. But there are certainly jobs that you can't do for as long as other jobs, right?
Yeah, and also, of course, going forward, the idea that people should have had less physically demanding lives is true. But when you're dealing with the people who are already at pension age now or coming up to it, they have lived through those times when there were a preponderance of very heavy manual labour jobs in their early lives, which have taken their toll on their bodies and their health. So you've got to plan pension policy, not just for the next 40 years, but look at the cohorts of people coming through today.
Yes. And that would mean as well, looking at one of the stories we discovered just the other day about how many people between the ages of sort of 16 and 24 are not working and haven't really got any intention of working and are not really expecting to work. And there's now something like 1 million of them. And I mean, that just is not sustainable, because apart from anything else, pensioners will need them to be working in order to pay into the system for the pensioners who are, you know, 50 years older than them.
Well, I think it's no good for society at all if you've got huge numbers of people who don't work at all if they could do so. And you've also got people in, you know, the later stages of their lives, maybe the late 50s or 60s, who can't maybe work full-time but could work part-time. And there's a lot of age discrimination against them, so they can't find work either. And, you know, whether it's the young people or those in the later stages of their lives, the labour market hasn't been working as well as it should. And certainly in terms of sickness benefits, there is a clear problem. It's much too easy to be signed off sick and sometimes never have another check again.
Right.
Whereas what you should be doing is having a proper system which says, OK, you may not be able to do some kinds of work. What kind of work can you do, rather than the fact that maybe you can't do other types, therefore you're written off? Because we shouldn't write people off from the labour market. It's not good for them. it's certainly not good for the economy, and it's not good for the long-term future of society either.
No. I mean, I've spoken to GPs who admit that they will happily sign people off work just from an email that they've been sent, as opposed to actually even seeing them on video, or certainly, heaven forbid, actually seeing them in person, you know.
Well, if you're lucky enough to get an appointment these days.
Well, exactly right. I mean, and then there was another story this week which said that basically workers, low-paid workers, more than 1 million of them, are to be entitled to 80% of their weekly salary as statutory sick pay, which normally you don't get, I think, for the first 3 days. They're now saying that you'll be able to get that from day one, which is, again, going to put more pressure on firms, isn't it?
Well, employers are suffering so many blows at the moment. And I think there is this kind of idea suddenly at the top of policy that employers have a bottomless pit of money and they can always afford more, and that actually you've got this narrative that we need to look after working people. Well, hang on a minute. Employers are working people, and they work their socks off to provide jobs for others. And of course, we need to be careful to make sure that we look after the low paid, and we need to be careful that we look after the future of the economy too, though.
Because I mean, all these people who are unemployed currently, or who are on various different welfare benefits, are not going to get job opportunities if there isn't any growth in the economy, and employers don't feel confident enough to start hiring people.
That's my big worry with the recent national insurance rise on employers, which is adding hugely to the cost of employing part-time workers, and also to the cost of employing low-paid workers. And then we've got the employment rights issues that are coming through. Of course, workers deserve decent conditions. We don't want to go back to Victorian times of exploitation. But there are some areas in which I think we have gone too far. And, you know, at the end of the day, if we put so much pressure on employers, especially small firms, the big employers can often afford it, but the smaller employers, maybe those who are growing, companies that want to succeed in future, if we take away their ability to make profit, or we take away their ability to employ people more flexibly, and that's another important issue. You know, some of these new rules will make it more difficult to have flexible employment, then you are damaging the underlying growth potential. And the government's main aim, quite rightly, is to get us back on a growth track. So we have to be careful to balance all these things, and I'm not sure the government's quite got it right in its balance here.
No, I think that is very, very clear. Ros, thank you very much indeed. Good to talk to you. Thanks very much. Baroness Ros Altman there, crossbench peer, former pensions minister as well. Let's get a quick voice note from Andy on Meghan.
Morning, Mike. Andy in Portsmouth. I couldn't give a fig about Meghan Markle, Meghan No Sparkle Markle, and her lifestyle shows. I mean, who really cares about that sort of stuff? Certainly not me. I'm much more interested in what you cooked for your dinner again last night, Mike. Far more interesting. Have a great show, mate.
Thank you very much. Last night I had a little chickpea and chorizo stew, which I'd actually cooked in a slow cooker, which was rather nice. A little bit of paprika in it, a little bit of, what else did I put in it? A bit of a shallot as well, a couple of chilies. Very pleasant. Yeah, I had it last night. Very good indeed. We could have this conversation every day. Maybe I should get a Netflix documentary series called Love Mike. Don't you? At 7:49.
bravely alongside the USA over the last 20 years and beyond. We know that some 636 Brits died fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan alongside the United States. So I don't know what random country he was referring to. What is weird about this, again, this is all about which end of the telescope you look at. So you've got J.D. Vance essentially saying the way you get peace is to give us some money. That's kind of what's being said, right? Just give us some minerals.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:53, very nearly. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Peter Cardwell's in for Julie Hartley-Brewer this morning. We'll get you to him just before 10 o'clock. Mark has got a voice note on Dan Hodges.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire. Just watching your interview with Dan Hodges, the ridiculous Dan Hodges, might I say. And he's holding up the fact that Trump was wrong in all this because there's been universal condemnation, so he says. Well, to my mind and to the mind of many people now, whenever there's universal condemnation of anything, that's when we all know beyond doubt that it's absolute nonsense. There was universal condemnation of anybody that didn't want to be prevented from visiting the dying relatives in hospitals and care homes. Universal condemnation of anybody who doesn't believe that we should totally impoverish ourselves to fend off some made-up fairy tale tragedy that might or might not happen in a million years' time. Absolutely nonsense. Nonsense spoken by the mainstream media, politicians and the Uni Party.
Mark, I can't disagree with you. Elle in Wales says, morning, Mike. My morning was going great. I made Meg's fruit rainbow. Took me an hour. Then Dan Hodges started spinning his lefty rubbish and now said rainbow fruit breakfast is all over the kitchen wall. Not sure what went wrong. I can tell you. Let's talk about what happened yesterday down in Westminster, because there was another big farm protest. Ollie Fletcher was there. He's a farmer from Leicestershire. The thing was different yesterday was that tractors were banned, basically. There was a few machines allowed into Westminster by the Metropolitan Police, but they basically threatened to arrest anyone who brought a tractor in unauthorised. Ollie, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good to see you. I hope the day went well yesterday. Tell us what it was like.
Well, I thought it went very well. There was a carnival atmosphere, as there often is at these events, although this time helped by the weather, which was wonderful.
It was a lovely day, wasn't it?
It was a very nice day. I thought the use of the big machines was actually a benefit. It wasn't planned to have tractors. You said tractors were banned, but that wasn't planned by the organisers, as I understand.
Right.
The big machines distinguished it visually from previous protests, which I think was good, because it's all about getting stories in the media and therefore having a visually...
And there was a big crowd, wasn't it? I saw the pictures.
Yes. I think between 10 and 15,000 I saw on social media, but I don't agree on that.
Yeah, I mean, and there's quite a lot of politicians now coming out to meet and greet you, but I guess the big question is, are any of those politicians from the Labour Party, or are any of those politicians from the Cabinet?
Well, we have had, I understand, 3 Labour MPs have come out publicly on our side. Henry Tufnell this last week, which is good. That shows that we are breaking through, we are delivering a message to the party, and those members who come out on our side will be delivering it much better than we ever could. So it's very important that we have them on our side. And of course, with the next election so far away, we have to focus our efforts on delivering an argument to the government about why we need food in this country, which I thought the NFU president, Tom Bradshaw, did very, very well. As we have seen, the geopolitical situation at the moment is somewhat unstable, as is our food supply. We rely on Europe, particularly, for about 30% of our food. If something is to happen in Europe, whether or not we are involved, whether or not it is right, it's going to upset our food supply. And that is a risk that, as a citizen, I really don't want to see my government taking. So I think it's very important that we broaden the argument from beyond inheritance tax to the whole host of other issues that are facing farming at the moment, but most crucially, simply the food supply. This country needs food. It's part of our national infrastructure, and I am scared that the government is neglecting that.
Yeah, absolutely right. And they still don't seem to be willing to move, though. I mean, I have these conversations practically weekly with people like yourself, and, you know, they haven't admitted that they've got the numbers wrong. They haven't admitted that their calculations don't really stack up. They still keep insisting that the effects of this inheritance tax is only going to affect a very small number of farms, which is clearly not the case.
Yes, it's upsetting, but it's a marathon, not a sprint. I don't think anybody was really expecting any movement before the spring budget. We have to wait for a parliamentary review because they haven't looked at the whether or not the tax is payable, essentially, and they will have to do that before it comes in. So there are these things that are, you know, a long way off, and there is a concern that people are taking their own lives already to avoid the tax, which is an unspeakable tragedy that a government would do that to its own citizens. So there are people panicking, but we must hold our nerve, and you know, it's a marathon, not a sprint, as I say, and hopefully when these things come to review, they will be looked at, and then the case for them will completely fall apart, as it already has done in public. We've seen Dan Needle, who was the tax expert the government initially rested on, change his mind. There are very few credible people backing the Labour Party's position on this at the moment. But what we now need to do, we've shown that we're prepared to turn up at Westminster. We're not going away. We've done that. That's good. We need to start delivering a nuanced message to MPs, right to their offices, that sort of stuff, to build up the pressure on their caseworkers, who will put pressure on the backbenchers, who hopefully, as we're seeing with characters like Henry Tufnell, who are coming to our side, will then move and put pressure on the cabinet.
Absolutely. Good to talk to you, Ollie. Good luck with it. Ollie Fletcher there, farmer in Leicestershire. It's a marathon, not a sprint, like so many things these days. Tony from near John O'Groats has sent a very nice message. He says, Mike, you've got such a compelling programme, all the more since the weekend, that my cat wakes me up just before 6 every single day. Oh dear, Dan Hodges, squirm, baby, squirm. I'm one of your few that could see what was going to turn out as it has. I've had dreadful vitriol thrown at me for it. Absolutely right. Alex in Devon, Mike, morning. On fire again, I see. Is it me, or is Dan Hodges morphing into our dear leader? He's looking and sounding more like him every week, fixing the foundations, protecting the people of this country, putting more money in their pockets. I mean, it just, the list goes on and on. Steve says, it seems to me that Dan and the rest of the establishment are attempting to pull Trump and Vance down because they are disruptors. Don't play the establishment's game. Well, I certainly don't. There's absolutely no chance of that. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to talk to Esther McVeigh, former Minister for Common Sense. She's still absolutely full of common sense. Martina Bett joins us as well, political correspondent at The Sun. They've got a big piece in The Sun today on page 10 that we're going to discuss. Also, of course, all of your calls, all of your thoughts, all of your voicemails as well. Send them in. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. We'll be back after the news.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in. An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspects in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike
across the UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 8. The sun is up. It's looking a bit misty out there, but it's a lovely day. It was a beautiful afternoon yesterday, and if it's the same today, you can be betting your bottom dollar that people will be out and about. Very quiet at the moment, though, in London, it seems to me. There's not as many people around as you might expect. Esther McVeigh's here. She's going to be talking to us. She's a former Minister for Common Sense, and sure she'll be agreeing with me that common sense is definitely the way forward. Always has been, always will be. And there's another man who's very keen on it as well. Have a listen to this.
Past 6 weeks, I have signed nearly 100 executive orders and taken more than 400 executive actions, a record to restore common sense, safety, optimism, and wealth all across our wonderful land. The people elected me to do the job, and I'm doing it.
You know, if only Keir Starmer could say the same thing. Keir Starmer this morning looking a little bit bereft, a little bit isolated, a little bit alone. Why? Because Vladimir Zelensky has written to Donald Trump and basically said that he's ready to sit down and have peace talks with Russia. He's ready to sign the minerals deal, and he wants the war to end as soon as is very, very possibly able to be done. So basically Donald Trump, despite what Dan Hodges just said in the last hour, has managed to bring everybody to the table and will now bring in what is a peace process that might take a while, but he's on that road. Wait and see is what I've always said. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer, who was drumming up himself as a sort of Henry Kissinger stroke Winston Churchill figure at the weekend, having a Euro summit of the so-called willing, who have all now become unwilling, including Giorgia Meloni, who says, yeah, you can go into Ukraine if you want, but not with my troops, you don't. And hardly any European nations actually willing to stump up any individual contributions. However, don't worry, because Ursula von der Leyen will do it for you. She's volunteered £800 billion of money to go to Ukraine from the European Union. Not quite sure who gave permission for that, but, you know, that's the way they roll. 0344 499 1000. We'll also be talking about how it's possible that there's more than 1 million people in this country now living here who moved from abroad who don't speak English. An extraordinary story in The Sun this morning. Chris Phelps has been talking about it, who's the Shadow Home Secretary. 0344 499 1000. We'll also talk about the reviews being in for Meghan Markle's new TV show. It's been branded smug and syrupy schmaltz. Absolute and utter cobblers. And I've got one here from Pete the Mole, who said Meghan's new cooking show looks like it's aimed at 5-year-olds. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Now, we were talking about cooking earlier because some of the cooking that's going on in Meghan's Love Meghan show is really quite remarkable. One here from Cliff in Berkshire, who's suggesting that I do a cooking show. Your lifestyle show could be called The Grappling Gourmet. Not quite sure how you mean that. And how about this from Sean? Great idea for your cooking show. From the table of common sense, says Sean in Norfolk. Well, why not indeed? Common sense is very much what we've been doing here. We are the home of common sense, the world headquarters of it, no less. So why wouldn't we want to speak to Esther McVeigh, former Minister, indeed, for Common Sense? Esther, very good morning to you. Now, I've been quite amused watching and looking around, and I know it's a very serious subject, the Ukraine war and what everybody wants to do about it, but the amount of gnashing of teeth that's going on now from people like Dan Hodges and others, because they were telling us all how terrible Donald Trump was, what an awful man he was, how rude he is, you know, how terrible J.D. Vance is and all the terrible things that he's been saying. But suddenly it's all coming together, you know. He made his speech in Congress last night. It looks as though Zelensky is coming to the table. He's coming back for more. He's ready to sign the minerals deal. He's ready to talk about peace. He's ready to stop fighting, which is what everybody wants, right?
Yeah, I think the words you said, wait and see, and give everybody an opportunity, I think is spot on. I think we all watched that Oval Office meeting and cringed. It was toe-curling, and nobody came out of it well. That was Trump, that was Vance, and that was Zelensky. And there was a lot there that should have been said in private, and I didn't really understand why they had the cameras rolling for every bit. Right. You know, 40 minutes it was fine, though slightly tense, and then 50 minutes it went on the skids. Yes. But then what's happened afterwards is realism probably dawning. What can you afford? What is going to happen? How do you get peace? There was definitely bullying by both Vance and Trump at that meeting. Quite incredible that there was a good cop, bad cop going on, and Vance made Trump look like the good cop. But you saw what was going on, and I think that was deeply uncomfortable. Diplomacy is there for a reason. However, he does, and this is Trump's style, force conclusions. And the bit I'd say about the wait and see, we do need, and Ukraine will need, those security guarantees. Putin has signed deals in the past and ignored them. So I think that's something we've got to wait and see on. The other thing is, you cannot allow a country to invade another one and get away with it. That is not how it works. You cannot have a country bullying another one and taking the land. So I think all of these, fundamentally, that security issue. And then the thing that Trump said is, oh, we've now got economic interests in Ukraine, as if that will make it safe. Look, there were American interests in Ukraine before Putin invaded. It didn't make it sense. It didn't make it safe. So I get what you're saying. It's an unusual way to do things. He does sort of treat things as if it's an episode of The American Apprentice, and he does do all these things, warts and all, in public. But so many moving parts. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah. But he does seem to terrify these Western politicians who, you know, on the one hand speak ill of him behind his back, but you saw Keir Starmer's rather unfortunately craven display when he went to the White House, all that sort of touching him on the shoulder with his hand and smiling and making out that he was his best mate, talking about the special relationship. And that's all kind of blown up in his face now because, you know, he's now trying to make out that, you know, he was the guy that rang Zelensky to get Zelensky to write the letter. You know, that's kind of where he's left it. And you know, if he wasn't trying to push himself in, as I said, as some kind of, you know, Henry Kissinger figure, you know, just, you know, mind your own country, make sure that the European countries, you're a part of the conversation with them. But, you know, they don't really know what's going on either. I mean, he admits on the one hand, we can't do anything without America, but then he has a conversation with Donald Trump, I think it was on Monday night, just before he decides to pull all military aid to Ukraine, and Trump doesn't even tell him he's doing it.
Yeah, I think actually that smarming and fawning by both Starmer and Macron actually could have made Trump think he was on safer territory with Zelensky than he was. Yeah. That notion that everybody else rolled over to Trump might have made him think Zelensky was going to do the same thing. So I actually don't think that helped set the scene. But the one thing Trump has definitely done, which I absolutely agree with, that notion that America can't pay for everything. You know, he's looking at his taxpayers there and say, you know, you've all got to step up to the plate. Europe, you have to put money into your own defences. And for so long, you know, Europe has been condescending to America, hasn't got an NHS, doesn't pay as much for benefits. Well, do you know why? It was because it was being the police force for the whole of the world. Right. And what I'm saying is now, you know, my taxpayers need value for money.
And that's exactly right, you know, and one of the reasons, I said this to Dan Hodges earlier, one of the reasons why Trump is so driven to stop the war in Ukraine is money. you know, because he can't afford to spend hundreds of billions of dollars anymore. His voters won't accept it. They don't want it. They want America first. They want America to be built up and be strong and have a strong defence, as we should now have in Europe. But what he doesn't want is for this continuing and never-ending war to just drain the finances of the entire Western world.
I think one thing we need to be mindful of, the EU stepping up to the plate, all the European leaders, all of us putting more money into NATO. What I wouldn't like to see is the sort of EU, European leaders thinking they can go their own way and have their own European version and pull out of NATO. I think we need to be mindful of that.
Well, it wouldn't work, would it?
NATO.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the problem. I mean, what Trump has exposed is the terrible inexperience of most of these leaders, many of them quite new leaders as well. And many of them have sort of, you know, by their policies, ruined their own countries. You know, the immigration problems that we've got in Western Europe entirely started by Angela Merkel, you know, when she was the Chancellor of Germany. You know, the problems with you know, net zero, which have bankrupted an awful lot of economies. You know, and all of these kinds of things which have been sort of focused upon instead of defence, instead of the protection of our people and the protection of our own borders.
And I think that is, again, what really Trump has highlighted. One of the key things that a nation should do, it needs to protect its country, it needs to protect its people, and you know what, you all need to pay in to the pot.
Right. And also that protection should also be protection for, you know, your own borders when it comes to immigration, when it comes to the biggest problem that Europe has got. And I remember speaking to Chris Parry, you know, the former NATO commander, who said back in 2008, when he was in charge of strategic planning at the Ministry of Defence, he said two of the biggest things to watch out for in the future was growing illegal migration and the growing sort of power that Russia was building up. And both of those things he was told to stop talking about and to never mention again, because the Labour government didn't want to know.
Yeah, well, you've got, you know, dangers from within and dangers from without, both of which are in your control, and you need to look at that. And that, again, when you talk there about the illegal migration and the legal migration, you need to know who's coming in. You've got to do it in a measured way that the country can absorb. And, you know, you see people being allowed to stay in the country on the most tenuous of circumstances, people talking about the right to family life, and that isn't the case. Right. No, we do now need to say, these are our rules, this is what we live by. I think you mentioned a little bit earlier, if you come to this country, you've got to believe in our fundamental, you know, what it means to be British, got to believe in our culture and our ideals and our views. You've got to speak the language. Right. You were talking about people who can't speak the language, aren't working and are taking more and more from the state. Again, we've got to say stop.
Right, because one of the things that we know drains money out of our public's health system and also our judicial system is the number of interpreters that we keep having to hire to pay for people to make sure that people can understand what's being said. I mean, this is an extraordinary story in The Sun today. 10% of residents who were born overseas struggle with the language. 794, so nearly 800,000 people cannot speak English well. 138,000 can't speak it at all. That's an awful lot of people.
It is, and you cannot integrate if you cannot speak the language. This is where you get a sort of a ghetto. This is where you get cultures not allowing sometimes their women, their children to be British and allowing them to integrate fully in the community because they don't speak the language. This is a key issue. And as you say, we can't make it so easy for people. You can't provide interpreters because that stops them actually doing the things that are necessary to be a part of the UK.
Yeah, absolutely right. And just while we're on the subject of strength and international kind of protection, story in the Mail today, Labour's been accused of placing its relationship with Beijing over national security because they've left China off a new register which is supposed to sort of prevent plots and espionage on British soil. I mean, you know, we might be focusing on Russia at the moment, but we should be very careful, surely, about China as well.
Yeah, well, to me, this happened, and you know, people, you know, both people on the Labour members of Parliament and Conservative, all sides of the House, can't understand why China isn't on the enhanced tier here? Why are they having the red carpet rolled out to them? Well, I'll tell you for why. Reid's budget was so bad, it stopped business in its tracks. It had a devastating impact on the economy. That the first thing she did was went over to China, cap in hand, looking for money. The best thing Reeves and the Labour Party could do is reverse some of those the worst parts of that budget and not be beholden to China for money. This is where it all comes from, her terrible budget.
Yeah, exactly right. And the terrible budget doesn't get any less terrible, does it? Because we're going to get an update on the terrible budget later on this month, where she's going to presumably say that she's going to save loads of money by cracking down on welfare. But I don't know how she's going to do it. I've not seen any plans at all.
Well, I cannot see that. This is the party, and remember, I was in the Department of Work and Pensions for many years, starting as a junior minister, moving up and then becoming Secretary of State. The Labour Party pretty much voted against any changes that we were doing. The stuff that really made significant impact for the country and got people into work. So when I was there, 1,000 more people each and every day were getting into work, because we said if you're getting benefits, there are conditions to that benefit. Yeah. And that means you've got to apply for work, you've got to go for work, and you've got to be in a state that you're good enough to do that work. Yeah. And they were calling it slave labour when we did work experience. They were saying it's terrible what you're doing with sanctions. Labour will not be able to change the benefit system. It is not in its DNA.
No, quite. And we're watching Rachel Reeves and Jonathan Reynolds walking around there. Maybe they should just give tips to people when they're applying for jobs to just fake a CV, just pretend you've done something you've never done.
That's right, that's the easy way to get a job, fake a CV. No, you do not do that. You actually do the job, you get the qualifications, have the credentials, but can I tell you, it's showing that they don't have the qualifications they're claiming to have. It shows they haven't got the experience. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had this disastrous budget, and you wouldn't have people talking about things which are nonsensical. Business now, and I have to tell you this, are flabbergasted by what Labour's done, fundamentally on things like increasing the employer's national insurance contribution.
Yeah, absolutely incredible stuff. Great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Esther McVey, a very sensible woman, former Minister for Common Sense, of course. Yeah, listen, if you apply for a job, just tell them you used to be a solicitor. That's what Jonathan Reynolds did. Even if you weren't, doesn't matter. Yeah, listen, you'll get the job, you'll keep the job. Your boss won't mind, it's fine, it's absolutely no problem at all. Or tell them you were an economist, even better. And say, you know, not only was I an economist, but I studied economics at the London School of Economics. And I've now got a master's degree in economics, and I'm therefore an economist. Yes, of course you are. Jeanette from Newcastle, Jan, in fact, says this: as far as I'm aware, Starmer said, and I paraphrase, that any country can join the coalition of the willing, and it was these countries that Vance was referencing as random. I did not take it he meant the UK, as he is well aware of our war with Iraq, which was only 20 years ago, not 30 or 40. These people just want to attack him and Trump at every opportunity. I think that's absolutely spot on. That's exactly what is going on here. I'd pay for someone to bring a group in to cut wasted tax money, to bring back common sense, to have a strong leader, and to make our country great again, says Bill from Oldham. The Americans got that for free by ticking a box. How can people not like Trump? I don't know what it is that drives people so insane about him. Let's have a voice note from Steve.
Hello, Mike. Steve from Brentwood here. Dan Hodges this morning, totally embarrassing. Before Trump was president this time, how many EU leaders and Starmer talking about peace in Ukraine? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. You're quite right. Very well said. We've got more of that to come, of course. Coming up, Martina Bett's going to join us today. Page 10 of The Sun. It's written by Leo McKinstry. We need national security, not social security. And he shows a graph in this thing where social security, adjusted from 1979, has ballooned from 100 billion up to something like 275 billion, more than double the amount spent back then. Meanwhile, defence spending has stayed pretty much the same, but as a percentage of GDP has fallen from 7% in 1956 down to something more like 2% in 2024. It doesn't make for good reading at all if you want to have defence of the realm. You want to look after your people, which is what, of course, Keir Starmer says he wants to do. We'll talk to Martina after this.
It's Plank of the Week with Mike Graham.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. I'm Mike Graham and this, of course, is Talk. I think he was shocked. You can see the genuine shock.
I was like that.
He sees the boats coming in. Right, let's have the women and children first. He went, oh, just you lads, is it?
Yeah. He's been allowed to develop into this huge sort of problem for the BBC.
Yeah.
He'd love it, wouldn't he?
He would love it. That's why we're not doing it.
That's why we're not doing it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 23 minutes past 8. We're going to speak to Martina Bett, political correspondent at The Sun, very shortly. But don't forget, we are also going to address what happened yesterday in Parliament about the BBC, because, of course, it turns out that Hugh Edwards still hasn't repaid any of that money that he was given after he left the BBC when he was currently or supposedly, in theory, on suspension. He was supposed to give that money back. He still hasn't, and apparently he's been blasted by the BBC. Tim Davie was up before the Beak yesterday talking to a select committee and saying basically they still haven't got it. He doesn't seem to want to give it to them. So what are they going to do now? Morning, Mike. I honestly think that our country should come first and the rest of the world second. Starmer has everything arse about face. He's not a patriot, says David. And one from Carol who says, morning, Mike. Meghan, it looks more like a food arranging show from what you've shown. It's ridiculous and a complete waste of time. Have a great day. Well, the Sun have a lot on that as well. Here's a voice note from Gren.
Morning, Mike. Got a great idea for a show. It is a cookery programme, but I think it'll be Netflix bestseller. You and Kev in the kitchen, Kev and Mike in the kitchen, getting absolutely smashed and just talking utter for, well, practically all day. Bit like you used to before with the other guy, but obviously this time you'd have Kev, who's a bit more vocal. Great show, pal.
Exactly. Great, it's a good idea. You never know. It's what we used to do when he lived in LA. He used to go out there and talk absolute rubbish for hours on end in some bar or other. Anyway, let's talk to Martina Bett, political correspondent at The Sun. The Sun on page 10 today. Liam McKinstry is writing, we need national security, not social security. And again, bringing us back to this argument that we've not spent the amount of money on defence that we should have done, and instead social security, welfare has gone absolutely through the roof. Martina, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you. Thanks very much for joining us. I mean, this is now going to become the conversation, isn't it, around every sort of cabinet table, every time there's a meeting with Rachel Reeves, every time any departmental head asks for more money, there's going to be a very different focus. And it's all kind of been brought about by the combination of J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, it seems.
Absolutely. It does seem that Britain and Europe are waking up from what Leo McKinstry says, decades of political fantasy. You know, it calls from this complete reset and from our economy, from our immigration system, welfare system to our military. He makes the case for a stronger, more reliant nation. And, you know, I think he taps into this growing frustration among many people that political elites have ignored reality for too long, really. Yeah. So, yeah, the stats you mentioned, you know, I think is absolutely striking. Europe, it says that Europe makes up just 7% of the world's population, but consumes more than 50% of global welfare spending. I mean, that's just a huge imbalance.
It really is. And also, when you look at those graphs at the top of the page, they really are telling, aren't they? From 1979, 100 billion, which was a lot of money, and it's adjusted to today's prices, I know, but it's gone up to more than 250, maybe 275, and it's likely to go up to 100 billion, and more, I think, I'm told, by the time we reach the end of this decade. Yeah,
so it does provide for some thinking, and I know I've heard that the new reforms that the Labour government is going to bring in terms of reducing the ballooning benefits bill will come in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
What that looks like, I'm not sure. It's going to be in the form of a green paper. There was a white paper published a couple of months ago that said absolutely nothing and had no detail. We know that the Conservative Party, when he was in government, brought about some savings. They were around the work capability assessments, and Labour said he would match those savings, but said how. Like, it didn't say how it was going to do that. So it would be really interesting to see what they've come up with.
Yeah, absolutely right. We see as well this morning, Rachel Reeves is saying she's happy to make those cuts, not just to welfare, but to other public services as well, likely to affect the NHS, likely to affect a lot of the plans that Labour said they had for spending money. That's not going to play well with their MPs or their voting bloc, is it?
No, absolutely not. I mean, we knew that there were going to be spending cuts in this spending review in the spring. I think we're just a month out of it. Like, we've got a month to wait and see what she's going to come up with. But it's hardly surprising. And actually, with the increase in defence spending that the Prime Minister just announced, which is not enough, and we know it's not enough, 2.5% is not enough. We need to get to 3%. It's just going to make those cuts even deeper, I think.
Yeah.
And I think in the column, Liam McKinstry makes the point that, you know, he talks about our army. We've got just 74,000 troops. It's the smallest it's been since the 19th century. This is not good. And actually, you know, as much as we criticised Donald Trump in the last few days, and I think what he's done in the Oval Office was not good, it is a wake-up call. And in the next few days, we'll see other European countries, you know, rearming and putting more money towards defence, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Martina, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Martina Bett, political correspondent of The Sun. Great piece by Leo McKinstry today. We need national security, not social security. Defence spending has gone down as a part of GDP, whereas welfare spending has massively rocketed up. Let's talk now, though, to Mike Neville, who is, of course, our man, former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector. A terrible story yesterday, which I'm sorry to say doesn't really even make much in most of the papers this morning. There's a little paragraph here and there, but a teenage boy, 16 years of age, shot dead on a London street in broad daylight yesterday afternoon outside of a station called Stockwell, which is not a million miles away from Brixton. Mike, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. It's tragic, isn't it? I was a young police constable in Clapham, where the police station is a few hundred yards from there, and a detective inspector.
Yeah, and it looks like it happened on a relatively residential street, you know, as I say, not far from a tube station, but in the middle of the afternoon. I mean, this is happening now on such a regular basis that it's not even big news anymore.
It's tragic, isn't it? And not only this is at 2:30 in the afternoon, it's a very residential place. It's all flats on the Studley estate. In addition to this, you had a lad stabbed at 1 o'clock in the afternoon in Swiss Cottage at school.
Yeah.
It's out of control. And what you have, the Met Police, the response to this is a race action plan and a stop and search charter. It's not what's needed. What's needed is vigorous policing to take these guns and knives off the streets so our children are safe.
I mean, we're talking about stop and search being ramped up again. Some police officers are keen on it, some not so much. What do you think that's going to do, if anything?
The trouble is with stop and search, of course, is that the police have forever been accused of racism. You saw the Baroness Casey report, which accused the police of over-policing the black population in London. This is the elephant in the room. What it never says, and what the recent stop and search charter says, of course, that young black men are victims of all this, it doesn't address the disproportionality in the committing of crime. And that is a tragic thing. That it's a reality, though. And what you have is many young police officers are afraid of doing stop and search because if you're accused of racism, you could be suspended, you could lose your job. What senior officers should be doing is, like I say here, they should be telling the truth, backing up their officers and saying to these black community leaders, you've got to get on board. You have to come on board because it is young black men who are dying here. And the social media has shown an image of the young lad who was killed yesterday, and there's no surprises there. And it's a really sad thing that people playing politics is not what's needed. What's needed is effective support of the police so the police can do their job without fear of being sacked on some spurious allegation.
And is there a sense that there's more guns now on the street illegally than there were?
Well, what you have as well, you have very organised crime, particularly from Albania, and they're ruthless with guns. Guns have always been on the streets. In 2012, I dealt with a shooting in Stockwell where a young girl was shot by gang members. They were running around shooting, and she was just in the shot, 5 years old, crippled for life. So there's always been guns. I think what the frightening thing is now is that the attacks are not in the sort of dead of night. They're in public streets, in the day, in schools as well. So people are rightly afraid, are their children safe on the streets or going to school? It's just not good enough in a modern Western country where people should be safe.
Yes, exactly right. Mike, good to speak to you. Thanks very much indeed. We haven't got a lot of time this morning. Mike Neville, former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector, with that terrible story from yesterday afternoon. In broad daylight, 16-year-old young man gunned down, shot to death on a London street. The police are still looking for the assailants and/or the assailant, whoever that may be. Let's get a voice note from Jill.
Morning, Mike. Great show as ever. Jill from Northampton here. After the excitement of the Arsenal 7-1 win, I was quite pumped up. So I put Meghan Markle's new show on just to send me to sleep. It was like someone was singing me a lullaby. It was amazing, out like a light. Then I was awake in the night to listen and watch Trump deliver his speech. Oh my goodness, all the things that man has done or is about to do, delivering what he promised, examining expenditure domestically and abroad, and cutting it out. And I can see also what you see. The way to end a war is to do a deal, and that is what Trump is doing. No, what's the point in just throwing money at it to perpetuate the war? 3 years down the line, nothing has happened. And here we are, weeks in, Trump has stirred everybody up. And that's what he's done. That's what his aim is.
And that's exactly why I always say to people like Dan Hodges, wait and see, when you get to the end, what's happened? You know, there's a line in The Untouchables, and it comes from Al Capone, I'm afraid, where he says, you know, when you want to see who's won in a prize fight, you wait till the end, and whoever's left standing, that's the guy that won. And that's what ends up happening. Vladimir Zelensky has come to the table. He has been pushed out of the White House on Friday. It's now Wednesday, and he wrote yesterday that he's willing to come back and do the deal on the minerals. He's willing to have the talk about how the peace deal can be structured, and he's obviously willing to consider having a ceasefire as well. All of those things were not on the table before last Friday. 3 weeks ago, the European Union hadn't even heard of a peace deal. They didn't know what they were doing. They were too busy organising their next trip to Strasbourg on that train. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Morning, Mike. Great show. I don't like the way you're harping on about Trump, says Baz in Wigan, when a big fact you seem to not mention is Donald Trump never served a day in the US military in his life. Well, why would he, Baz? You know, he didn't have to be conscripted, did he? He didn't have to go and fight in Vietnam. A lot of people didn't fight for the US Army of his age because he wasn't alive during the war. But, you know, it's up to you. If that's a point for you to make, you can make it. But it doesn't make a difference to what he's doing now, really, does it? I mean, George W. Bush also didn't go and fight in a war, but he ordered one in Iraq. You know, lots of history of American presidents who didn't do it. Bill Clinton, I don't think, fought in any wars either. And he had a few wars going on with Osama bin Laden, I seem to remember. I don't mind people being critical. I just despise people being selectively critical. Joe Biden had just as big of a row with Vladimir Zelensky, but nobody wrote about it in the same way that they do now. 0344 499 1000. Coming up, we're going to talk about Hugh Edwards, the bogeyman of the BBC. He's a paedophile, he owes money, he hasn't paid up. There's only one thing to do as far as I'm concerned. We'll talk coming up next to the defund the BBC people.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glories, 8:38. This from Lisa, who says this. Great show as usual. The sad thing is Dan Hodges and the left hate Trump so much they will be hoping this peace deal doesn't work so they can criticise him, keep up the good fight for common sense. Well, that is the problem, isn't it? A lot of people don't understand that you can actually like something without liking the person who's involved in it. You know, the idea that suddenly all politicians, apart from Donald Trump, are really, really nice people and you'd love to have them around for dinner. Well, I'm afraid it's just not the case. Let's get a voice note from Matt.
Mike, Matt in Hove here. Just on the back of Zelensky U-turning and Trump getting the deal done, I cannot wait for the loony left quinoa, flapjack, super skinny hot oatmeal latte brigade in their Birkenstocks and dry robes reading The Guardian are going to have to come out and say, well done. But they won't. They haven't got the minerals to do that. All they're going to do is come out and say, oh, Donald Trump is transactional. He's a businessman. He doesn't care about war. They're going to find somewhere or another to not give him the credit for single-handedly just shutting down Gaza and Ukraine, just like that.
Yeah, absolutely right. There's no way that they're ever going to give any credit because they can't bring themselves to do it. They absolutely just hate Donald Trump. And it's so close-minded and short-sighted as well, because at the end of the day, surely to heavens, if somebody does something that's worthwhile, you congratulate them for it. Steve says this, how about a show Cooking with Keir? First episode could be a 2-tier cake and a recipe for disaster. Very good. Talking of recipes for disaster, let's talk about the BBC. Rebecca Ryan's here, campaign director of Defund the BBC. The Sun's page 7. Pedo keeps huge salary, pretty much says it all. Have Hugh no shame? Disgraced Hugh Edwards has been blasted after BBC chiefs revealed he toyed with handing back 200,000 quid he was paid after his arrest. But then he's decided to keep the cash anyway. And Tim Davie, who was in front of another select committee yesterday, Rebecca, doesn't seem to have a clue how to get it.
Yeah. It's awful, isn't it? He's just, he's shameless, isn't he, this guy? He's walking around his hometown kind of just as if nothing's gone on. And he played a blinder, let's face it, where he sort of cried mental health crisis and went underground for 6 months so that he could milk all of this salary.
Right.
But it's just so frustrating for the British people that we've had to fund a paedophile. And he knew, he knew he was going to plead guilty eventually, or maybe he sort of having a crisis, hoping that, in that 6 months they'd try and find a way out of it. But he knew, obviously, what he'd done and was just milking that salary. And that's outrageous. For the BBC to just be like, well, we've asked for it back, but he hasn't given it. It's just, that's not an acceptable situation for the broadcaster to be in.
No, it's not. And also, there was a point at which, I think, during the time when he was still being paid while suspended, that the seriousness of the charges became clear to the BBC, and that's the point at which surely they should have cut him off.
Absolutely. And they're just hiding behind these sort of HR lawyer, protections and what have you, where he can't, be forced to give this money back. And if that's the case, if really, legally they have no foot to stand on, then those contracts need to be changed. That if people, are committing crimes whilst in receipt of British taxpayers' money, they'll have to pay it back. They should be forced to pay it back.
Definitely, absolutely right. Well, let's have a look at Tim Davie. He was on up in front of MPs in the Commons Culture, Media and Sport Committee yesterday, him and Samir Shah as well. Here's what he had to say about the BBC as a brand.
This was a serious failing, but we have trust numbers that we're very proud of. We're the most trusted brand in the world. And part of what we do to earn that trust, and believe me, it's never an easy day, is actually be highly transparent and go through enormous processes when we fail like this to show how we're going to fix it, and we're very transparent about that. And I think that is part of our process.
Well, how are they transparent about it? How are they going to fix it? And why is nobody to this moment, as far as I know, taking any responsibility for how it all went wrong?
Well, exactly. I mean, he says there that they're the most trusted brand in the world. I mean, I'd love to see how that push polling was carried out. But they're the least trusted broadcaster in the UK, and it's the UK taxpayers who are forced to pay for it. I think that's the more important figure there. But yeah, on this Gaza documentary, absolutely, something seriously has gone wrong here. And for Tim Davies to sort of be like, oh, well, we're going to have a look at it. And, you know, it might come back online. That is just outrageous. I mean, we've all been following this for weeks now, and for him to be sort of, you know, it could go either way, and we've had more complaints for it to be put back on. Well, we've seen here that it's been mistranslated, and actually they've been calling for jihad against the Jews, and they translated it into calling it Israel or the IDF.
Yes. Well, they deliberately changed what people said in the subtitles, which is not only a breach of journalistic ethics, it is completely surely against the BBC's doctrine of whatever it is that they say makes them the most trusted organisation in the world. Also, we know that Deborah Furness, who's the head of the news department, actually watched it some weeks before it went out and didn't think to ask anybody whether it was kosher, as it were.
Exactly, and she just said, well, she assumed that all the checks had been done. Well, that's not good enough to just assume when you're in that position and the buck stops with you. So it's not okay just to assume that checks have been done when they know that time and time again the BBC has fallen down on coverage in this particular part of the world. You know, they misreported about bombing of a hospital, which caused huge outrage across the world. Yeah. They have this massive responsibility, and they're doing it all on British taxpayers' money, and that's not okay. So it's all very well for Tim Davies to turn up to sort of parliamentary committee and sit there and sort of whitewash everything, but he's just not taking accountability. And that's why we would, from the BBC, would always say, let's get rid of the licence fee, because these people are never going to take accountability whilst they are in receipt of taxpayer money.
No, of course they're not. And again, this is not the only, you know, it's not the only problems that they've got this week. You know, we've got them going after licence fee payers with even more zeal than they did in the past. We've got them making mistakes over their payment procedures, paying, I think, £4 million overpayment to people who didn't deserve the money because it was a mistake, and, you know, still convincing themselves that they're the most trusted brand in the world. You know, it just doesn't really wash, does it?
Well, exactly. But this is the thing. They believe that what they say becomes the truth, and that's what they do over and over again. And it's really uncomfortable for people who are really, you know, if they want to watch sort of Sky Sport or whatever, they have to pay for BBC, and yet they see the BBC behaving in this way as if it's untouchable. And that's not okay. Unfortunately, because we've got to go Labour government, they're probably not going to do anything about it. So we're going to have to wait, you know, for another government to come in and do something. But in the meantime, it's really uncomfortable for people to see the BBC behaving in this way as if it's untouchable. And so, you know, our position would be to say, you know, stop watching any live broadcast TV, and then you don't have to pay for it. If you're watching things that are on demand or catch up, then you don't have to pay for this organisation.
Yeah, absolutely right. Couldn't agree more, Rebecca. Very good to talk to you. Rebecca Ryan, campaign director of Defund the BBC. And Hugh Edwards, of course, still absolutely disgracefully refusing to hand back the money. Well, surely the BBC must have ways of collecting money. If he hadn't paid his TV licence, they'd be having bailiffs knocking on his door. He owes them 200 grand, but they don't know what to do. How amazing is that? Why don't you get the bailiffs on him? You know, start removing some of his furniture and just go, look, sorry if you don't want to pay me back the money. We'll just take it out of your bank account, or we'll reach in and grab it. There must be something they can do, surely to heavens. Let's get a voice note from Darren.
Good morning, Mike. Darren from Carmarthen. Hope you're well. Just had some very good news through the post, Mike. I've had a Netflix pilot actually approved by the company, so I'll be starting a brand new series on Netflix starting from next month, Mike. It's actually me basting chickens, showing all about basting chickens, Mike, and it's going to be called With Glove. So With Glove coming soon to TVs near you.
Darren, brilliant. With Glove. I mean, there's so much you can do with that, isn't there, really? I mean, we're going to be talking to Angela Levin coming up next, our favourite royal biographer. I'm sure she'll have a thing or two to say about Meghan's amazing new documentary series, With Love, Meghan, in which she shows you basically how to do nothing at all of any use in a fake kitchen with some fake friends and some food that she didn't buy. Brilliant. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to 10 minutes to 8. 10 minutes to 9, I should say. We're almost into the final hour. I don't know where the time has gone, by the way. Peter Cardwell's in for Julie Hartley-Brewer this morning. He'll be here in just over an hour's time. Warwick says this from Devon. Mike, great show as always. Why is it that the left-wing wokes at the BBC give loads of coverage to the Palestinian marches, but hardly any to the farmer protests yesterday? We pay good money to BBC for them to be so biased towards their Hamas pals. Absolutely right. From John in Cheshire, Mike, UK boots on the ground in Ukraine. If it happens, will Argentina think it's an opportune time to regain the Falkland Islands? Well, that's a good point. And one here from Claire, who says, morning, Mike. The difference between Trump and Starmer is his priorities. Trump to his country and to his people. Starmer's is to Europe and the globalist agenda. Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that. Keir Starmer getting an awful lot of flack this morning for not least just wasting everybody's time on Sunday by trying to organise the Coalition of the Willing, which has now become, as we said, the Coalition of the Unwilling. Let's talk to Angela Levin, though, royal biographer, all over the front pages today. Meghan and her new show. Don't call her Meghan Markle, though, because have a look at this. She doesn't like it.
I don't think anyone in the world knows that Meghan Markle has eaten Jack in the Box and loves it.
It's so funny, too, that you keep saying Meghan Markle. You know I'm Sussex now. You have kids, and you go, no, I share my name with my children.
Yes.
And that feels so... I didn't know how meaningful it would be to me, but it just means so much to go, this is our family name.
Well, Angela, her family name is now Sussex, so... that's how we must call her. What is it, Mrs. Sussex? What is it?
Yeah, this was supposed to be a friend, and this is already telling her off when they've only been for 3 minutes. But actually, what I would say in return is that she always calls Princess Catherine Kate.
Yes.
Because she wants to do that, and that's demeaning Kate. So she should keep her mouth shut about this.
Quite.
Anyway, I use my maiden name. People don't, and they know women nowadays have two names if they're married. What a big deal. But to say that to a friend who's coming in to talk to you and be nice to you, because there weren't very many people who she was really close to during that 4-hour thing, which I watched. I was absolutely almost dead by the end of it.
Yes, I bet. Thank you for watching it so none of us have to. I mean, it's bad enough for me watching the clips for it, to be honest. But she's also been accused, and not for the first time, of a bit of plagiarism, hasn't she? Because apparently Pamela Anderson did a similar show from Baywatch some years ago. Here's a little look at how they compare.
I love to cook. I just always have wanted to take things to another level.
I've always loved taking something pretty ordinary and elevating it.
Setting the table is like setting the tone. That's the romantic in me. Cheers!
This is about connecting with friends. I love that we're doing this together for the first time. Making new friends.
What? This is probably one of the most glamorous moments of my life.
It's magic!
This is one of the most beautiful meals, isn't it?
You guys killed this. It's just incredible.
You go through a long lifetime of cooking, and I just feel like I just started today.
We're in the pursuit of joy. Love is in the details.
Everyone's invited. Yeah, really? What about your dad? Is he coming? Hey?
The interesting thing about that is that she even copied her with a bag she went round the garden, which had strawberries in and all those leaves and all that sort of thing. But it wasn't her home. It was as if she was at home. She was talking about what you do at home, but she wasn't at home. She used someone's garden. She took loads of things out of it. I mean, you just think... And I found out she spent £130,000 on her clothes. Yeah. She was changing them nearly all the time. But what's really interesting is that she can't cook. She doesn't like cooking. She doesn't like actually baking, she said. But she likes fiddling with all the...
She likes arranging fruit. You know, I mean, that ludicrous clip where she's arranging the fruit into a rainbow so that the children can have it, and she's, you know, an active parent or an involved parent or something like that. You know, and any parent who's a parent knows you can't really spend that much time making breakfast for your kids.
Well, no, they got to get to school, haven't they? So, you know, you sit and do that, and then they start eating. It takes a long time. I mean, it was very, very weird. I think that the creativity, which she said rather rudely, that she hadn't been able to do while she was with the royal family. She didn't say the royal family, but
Right.
she said, I haven't done it for a long time, and now at last I can. There was nothing there. She actually thinks that most of us are stupid, because she said, have we ever had that gadget where you can blow up balloons on? It's wonderful.
Yes.
That was one thing. I mean, do you know anybody who doesn't know about that? Even if they don't have one?
Well, anyone who's been to enough children's parties and blown up balloons, after a while you end up having to buy one because you get fed up blowing up hundreds of balloons. Yeah, everybody knows about it. But she's
And
like,
also,
a lot of these people, that they discover something as if they're the first person that's discovered it.
Yes. The other one was that how to wrap something. And she had a square box. And she said, you must never start in the middle of the piece of wrapping paper you have. You have to put it to one end, and so that you don't waste it. And I thought, you know, I'm not that stupid.
Right. I mean, who needs this advice, really, is the question.
But we don't, you see. I mean, there was nothing there that was really exciting. With the spaghetti, she said, look, the spaghetti goes on the top of some tomatoes, and you put it in the oven, and the hot water will cook it. Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, really, spaghetti.
Yeah.
If you can't do spaghetti, then you're really, you know, missing out.
It is unbelievable, isn't it? And mercifully, Harry's only in it very briefly as well. He appears holding a glass of Bucks Fizz, I think, doesn't he?
Yeah, right at the end, 3 minutes he got, which is actually really mean. She wants to prove that she can manage on her own.
Yeah.
So she'd got that 3 minutes. He told her how wonderful she was and how happy he was to how well she's done.
Yeah.
And I think that's what she wanted from everyone. She wanted everyone to say how wonderful she was. And 2 or 3 of them were all saying, oh, I love it, Meghan, when you're really you. Well, who else
Really?
is she to be? And you know, I mean, it's really ridiculous, really ridiculous, and very strange. The first person who was there was the man who did her face makeup and did that for the wedding and everything. And she came in, and she immediately had come from New York, quite a long distance to where they are, and she immediately told him to sort of help her make some food for him.
Right.
You know, and he was saying, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," because this is what everything had to be wonderful.
And presumably she would have wanted a few celebs on it, like the people that she did podcasts with, you know, like Serena Williams, and they all said no, presumably, did they?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I haven't asked them. But actually, I think that they're no longer on the top or the middle. I think they're right down the bottom. People really need to keep well away from them, because this is ridiculous to moan about the TIG, which was the thing she did before she met Harry, and she sold things and recommended drinks. And she's gone on and on. She was doing this and several times during the 4 hours, complaining about she couldn't have it. But you can't have it if you're royal, because you can't make money on the fact that you're royal. But she, you know, she was obsessed with that. And she said, thank you, people have been with me, supporting me for so long while I've gone to do something like I really want to again.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, you're crazy. You know, she's rich, she's known everywhere, and it's still not enough. She wants to have her blog.
Yes, and it's really pathetic, actually, really, isn't it? Angela, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. We've got to run. Universally panned is what I would say, and I mean that with no pun intended. It's coming up to, of course, 9 o'clock. William Clouston from the SDP coming next.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike in...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. We're in the final hour of the show. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 9. The sun is up. If you're not up yet, that's fine. You can do what you want. But if my advice to you was to get up and do something, that would be exactly right. And that would be in keeping with, of course, Rachel Reeves, who's now decided that there's too many people on welfare and she needs them back to work. She's not really helping the economy, she's not really creating any jobs, but she does want people to get off welfare and get back to work, which is an admirable thing to want to do. But of course, we'll find out this week from the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, what the proposed cuts are going to be to the actual welfare bill, because it turns out that there's going to have to be an announcement on Wednesday, we understand, providing there's a financial forecast coming on the 26th of March and a spring statement. That's all going to be wrapped up into one, and we're going to find out exactly how much Keir Starmer wants to give to the defence spending of this country. Given what happened over the weekend, I'm not sure he's even qualified to come up with a number, because Keir Starmer this morning, I'm afraid, looks a little bit isolated, looks a little bit silly, looks as if he went a bit too early with his sort of Churchillian I'm Henry Kissinger act, because on Sunday he had a coalition of the willing, now he's got a coalition of the unwilling, and Vladimir Zelensky's gone over his head, gone back to Donald Trump and said, actually, I'm ready to do a deal. I'll sign the minerals deal, I'll sign a peace deal, I want the end to the war. This is all the things that Keir Starmer thought he didn't want until yesterday. Donald Trump last night made the longest address ever to the House of Representatives in Congress and basically laid out his plan for bringing peace to Russia and Ukraine. And it's all driven very much, as I've said for a long time, by money. Trump doesn't want to see wasting government money, and he believes that the war is a waste of government money. We're going to be speaking to William Clouston from the SDP, who's here. William, very good morning to you. Andrew Griffith is also going to be talking to us from Westminster, the Shadow Business Secretary. Let's get a voice note first, though, on Meghan and food shows from Steve.
Morning, Mike. Good idea for a show here. Cooking with care. First episode, he can show us how to make a two-tier cake, and then he can show us a recipe for disaster.
Yes, we've already had that one, but we didn't have it in your voice. Thank you very much. Reg says, hey, I'm a Birkenstock-wearing oat milk drinking person, and I love Trump. Well, that's a pretty unusual place to be. And Pete the Mole says, BBC, the most trusted brand in the world. I just spat my cornflakes out laughing. I don't blame you. This is Morning Glory. We've got lots to do. Let's get it on. So, very good morning to William Clouston from the SDP. William, good to see you. We've got lots to talk about. I'm just going to pop down to Westminster briefly to talk first to Shadow Business Secretary Andrew Griffith, who's there waiting patiently on College Green. Andrew, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Looks like another beautiful day. The spring is definitely in the air, I think. We haven't got much to look forward to, though, I'm afraid, with this government, because apparently spending cuts are coming, several £billion worth, including from the welfare budget, presumably to pay for increased spending on defence. But where and how are these cuts going to be made in particularly welfare?
Well, I think, Mike, businesses, pensioners, farmers, people up and down the country are going to be intensely frustrated to discover that now, after all, and remember we called for this, the government can cut public spending. They came in, they went on a spending spree. They've crashed the economy, destroyed any growth. We're in a per capita recession, meaning we're all getting poorer, and yet they put up taxes and took away people's winter fuel allowance. So if they could have cut public spending, that's the first thing they should have done, not the last thing that they are now doing. The Chancellor's made up some new fiscal rules, and it now looks like she's going to miss even those softer fiscal rules. So it's a real problem. She's done immense damage to the economy, and it's just pie in the sky, the idea, you know, we're going to be able to find more resources for our much needed expansion of defence spending when this government cannot grow the economy because they're making serially bad decisions.
Yes, and they've got more bad decisions to come because, of course, we've got the Workers' Rights Bill coming through, which looks like it's going to be landing rather hard on an awful lot of businesses. Reading this morning that striking is going to become a lot easier to do once again under this Labour government. Striking workers will only have to give 10 days' notice before they walk off the job, and it looks very much also as though many companies are going to be pressurised to spend even more money on those people that they're hiring.
The Unemployment Rights Bill, which should be the unemployment bill, is an absolute shocker. It's a 1970s disco of discontent. It's going to take us straight back, as you say, shorter notice for strikes, recolonisation of the private sector by trade unions, all sorts of extra red tape burdens on business. In fact, the only thing growing in Rachel Reeves' economy is the length of this bill. It started about 150 pages. I reckon it's well north of 200 pages now. Something that Tony Blair, Gordon Brown in government never did. You know, one of the few things this economy has going for it is a fair but flexible labour market, giving people the chance to get into work, often their very first job. It's where I started, I don't know about you, but started working part-time. Yeah. And the Employment Rights Bill coming to Parliament next week undoes all of that. It's really damaging. No government focused on growth should be going anywhere near this bill.
Absolutely. Listen, we've got to run because we haven't got a lot of time this morning. But, Andrew, thank you very much indeed. Andrew Griffiths, Shadow Business Secretary there, reporting in from College Green in Westminster. Beautiful day out there, but not much to look forward to. William Clouston's here. William, he's right, isn't he, to say that this Workers' Rights Bill is going to be very damaging to business in this country, which is already on its knees, thanks to the national insurance rise, which is coming in April, thanks to all the other taxes that have been put on, particularly small businesses. It's not a very good economic outlook, is it?
No, it all goes back to the terrible start they had. Doom and gloom, because they wanted to make a sort of tax grab, and they justified that by saying there was the black hole. And it's been doom and gloom ever since. Right. So yeah, it's not just what they say. The mood music was bad, and that has a downward effect anyway on the economy. But for things like hospitality and small businesses, you put the NI on, you put the taxes on, and they're just trying to squeeze the tax base, squeeze it as hard as they can, and ultimately there's only a certain amount you can get out.
Yeah, exactly. And everything is going up. I mean, we've got energy prices going up in the next month as well, with the energy price cap being raised, I think, for the third time under this Labour government, despite the fact that they promised a £300 rebate. That didn't happen. And also, they're not mentioning this black hole anymore. Ever since Keir Starmer's rediscovered the military, which I don't think Labour have had in mind since the last time Tony Blair was around, wanted to invade Iraq illegally, they're suddenly going, oh, we don't have a black hole anymore, we can find all this money.
Well, they've spent 12 or 13 billion on the Ukraine war, and you can argue the rights and wrongs of that if you like, but it's interesting, isn't it, the politicians always, as a rule, find money if they want something for their pet project. So if it's winter fuel allowances or something they don't like, they'll cut it and make people suffer. And as soon as it's something they want, suddenly the money's there. And as if by magic.
Yes, I know. And what do you make of Keir Starmer today? Because my view is that he looks a little bit stupid. He looks a little bit isolated. He went through this whole glad-handing thing with Donald Trump last Thursday, which was pretty embarrassing, frankly. I mean, I was cringing watching it when we said that on Friday, you know, touching him on the shoulder, you know, trying to be all pally with him.
A little letter from the King.
A little letter from the King. It was all, it was all very sort of performative and cringe-making, to be honest. Then, of course, he decides that after the bust-up on Friday, he's going to act as the peacemaker. You know, he invites Zelensky into London, then sends him off to see the King, then brings all these European leaders in, starts talking about coalitions of the willing, and it's all turned to dust, really, because he's out of the game, he's out of the picture.
Yeah, it's pompous, isn't it? I was cringing. I mean, both of those Oval Office events were bad for different reasons, weren't they? Starmer was just complete cringe. And actually, if you only have to go back a few years and listen to what Starmer and his Foreign Secretary said about Trump to know what they really think.
Yes.
So it's like everything else on Starmer.
Of course.
It's actually classic Starmer, isn't it? He slags the guy off and then says, oh, yeah, I'm your best mate.
Yeah, I'm your best mate, I'm patting you and I'm laughing, even though I don't really normally laugh, and it looks really, really awkward.
Really awkward,
It was just embarrassing. I thought, I mean, I said this on Friday, it's embarrassing for Britain to have somebody like that, and for his judgment to be so bad. And of course, all of his, you know, detractors sort of, you know, faded away and suddenly came behind him and went, oh, suddenly Keir Starmer's found a great
Do you know why they did that?
Why?
Because there are too many people in Britain that have this sort of outdated, pompous view of this special relationship, and they're so good, and the Americans really value us so much, and we're in this situation, and they delude themselves. Say on Ukraine, the shots have been called by Vance and Trump, and they will decide what happens when and where.
Right. And that's exactly how it's played out.
Exactly how it's played out, and it's awful, but this is the reality, I'm afraid. And yet, actually, Starmer just completely jumped the gun. And talk about coalition of the willing. He managed to convene those Europeans, and he obviously wants to get back into Europe. He wants to be back at the top table.
But that's why they came, because had it been Boris Johnson, they probably wouldn't have.
Very possible. But the thing is that it's the coalition of the willing and unwilling, because a lot of those states will not.
It's more like a coalition of the wilting, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, you know.
It is. No, it's. I'm afraid it's an awful situation. But anyone that comments, and you've seen this on social media, anyone that comments on the Russia-Ukraine war now, people on Twitter will put you in a pro-Putin camp immediately, and say you're a
warmonger.
Or you're a warmonger.
Yeah.
And in fact, in reality, in the real world, we face awful dilemmas.
Yeah.
They're awful choices.
Of course.
You know, Trump may well succeed in what people would call a dishonourable peace. It's quite likely, if that peace happens, that Ukraine will be partitioned.
But the dial always moves. I mean, I was speaking to Kira Riddick, who comes in on a regular basis as a Ukrainian MP, leader of the Voice Party, who's not a big fan of Zelensky's, actually. But I could tell just by talking to her yesterday that there is now a growing number of people in Ukraine who realise that an acceptable form of peace might actually include giving some land to Russia. And part of that agreement will be to do with the land that Russia believes that it's entitled to in the first place.
And the land it now holds. And it is an awful situation. It is a dilemma. But you've got to weigh that. And the people on the other side that are saying, you know, fight on another 10 years. Or the problem is that is it morally superior, actually, to get Ukraine to fight an unwinnable war for another 10 years and still get nowhere?
Right.
That's the problem. That's what, in reality.
I personally don't think it is, but it's my opinion, and that's what we do here. It's all about opinions. You know, it's not about who's right and who's wrong. But some people see it like that as well.
Whatever you say, Trump will decide. And he's actually the speed. You know, this blitzkrieg sort of right. I'll stop your. If they have no intelligence support. The analysts say it's a matter of months. So no, that'll focus this is the real world that we live in now.
And this is the thing about Starmer. I mean, Starmer's busy selling this line to people like Sky, who are busy reporting it, that it was his influence that led Zelensky to write a letter to Trump.
I think that's nonsense.
It is, of course it's nonsense. But he's also been forced to admit that he made a phone call to Donald Trump on Monday night, shortly before the aid was pulled, and he didn't even know it was happening because Trump didn't tell him.
No.
And that tells you more about the relationship than anything.
I'm afraid it does. Yeah, it's a sort of it's Europe. Someone wrote actually actually Michael Taylor wrote recently that it's Europe's Suez moment.
Yeah.
You're being told brutally who really has the power, and it's not Starmer.
Right.
And it's not Europe, actually.
And actually I read, and I've said this a few times on the show already, yesterday, a great piece in the Times by William Hague, who I don't normally read, and I don't normally support much of what he thinks, really, because he's one of the wets that kind of destroyed the Tory party. However, he was explaining in what I thought was a really interesting way that much of what Trump is driven by now is waste in government. So he's got this whole Doge operation going on with Elon Musk. He sees Ukraine as exactly part of that, because too much money has been sent there for no apparent purpose, because nothing's really happened. You know, no gains have been made. The war is not any closer.
If it's unwinnable,
and even when Zelensky said, I think on Saturday, that war is the peace is even further away now than ever. That it really concentrated his mind, and he went, well, what we're not doing is sending you another $300 billion.
And there is and again, something that people, particularly on social media, have forgotten about entirely, is that there is a democratic aspect to this. Remember that Trump, and particularly Vance, but Trump also, was elected on this platform.
Yes.
The American people voted for a president who wanted to end this war. Vance is on record as saying they should never have helped in the first place.
Right.
You know, so they're pretty clear what the Americans were voting for, and they're getting pretty much what they voted for.
Absolutely right. Well, should we get a clip from what he was saying about the Social Security problem when we talk about our Social Security problem? But have a look at this, what they've got.
But a lot of money is paid out to people because it just keeps getting paid, and nobody does, and it really hurts Social Security and hurts our country. 1.3 million people from ages 150 to 159, and over 130,000 people, according to the Social Security databases, are age over 160 years old. We have a healthier country than I thought, Bobby.
And that's Robert Kennedy, of course, there. You know, he makes a great point, and you can't tell me that we don't have the same problem, because
I'm afraid, Mike, we have the same problem.
Because the bureaucracy that we have created has led to systems which are failing and inoperable and don't work.
Yeah, so, I mean, we talk about DEI and things, all that should be scrapped, all that stuff. And then get a hold of your border and get out the ECHR, that would save you billions, and that would stop all that chaos. But actually, a lot of this has deeper roots, which actually the guy sitting behind Trump there totally understands Vance, which is in deindustrialization. What has happened, and this is why the tariffs are such a big issue, what has happened in the Anglosphere, in America and here, is that we've deindustrialized, the jobs have been shipped off to China, we've gutted the Midlands and the North, and a deindustrialized town is a phenomenally expensive thing. You know, some of these towns, 20% of the public, adults are on out-of-work benefits. You've got drug epidemics, you've got all sorts of social breakdowns.
Right.
And so
add into that the immigrants.
Right? Of course. You know, in putting pressure on social housing and all the rest of it. So, you know, one of the reasons this country's total welfare bill is projected to be sort of 371 billion this year. It's the biggest single thing. Is because of that failure. So unless we can get investment and industry back, you will have this doom loop of having to spend money, what I call mopping up the blood, and that's what's happening. A lot of that is what Trump's talking about as well. And I think he'll win the tariff war, actually.
Oh, I think he will. Totally. Again, everybody who argues against him ends up realising that actually he's right. And even the lefties here, who absolutely detest the idea that he gets things right and he gets things done, don't know what to do. One story I did want to get a thought from you on, and nearly 1 million people in Britain now, piece in the Sun today, can't speak English. You know, and 138,000 of them can't speak any English at all.
Well,
it's got to be a worry, isn't it?
There's lots of roots to this. I mean, it's not just the problem of integration. We're not asking them to. There's no effort to integrate, and we're not making any effort to make them integrate and speak English. And then when they turn up and want social services and medical services, we provide millions, literally millions, tens of millions, on language and translation. And actually, Rupert Lowe's, you know, been highlighting that as well. So unless you apply some pressure, if you want this service, you might actually have to learn English.
Exactly right, because of course the lefties' response to it is, well, when you go to Spain you expect everybody to speak English. Well, that's not the point. I'm not moving to Spain, and neither am I moving to any other place I go.
Falamos português when I'm in Portugal.
There you go. And actually I do try to speak the local language, but it is ridiculous. Mind you, here's one place that perhaps the Speaker of the House hasn't been, but he should visit on his worldwide trip as the
first class
ambassador. This is the Serbian Parliament yesterday, where they had a bit of a disagreement, and suddenly it looked like the terraces of Dynamo Zagreb, where they're chucking fire bombs and flash bang fireworks at each other and holding up flares. Absolutely extraordinary. Looks like an episode of the old Cup Winners' Cup, doesn't it?
It's astonishing, isn't it? Yeah, I went to see Ferencvaros play Newcastle United a few years ago. It's a little bit like that, actually.
Very similar. But no messing about. Anyway, listen, great to see you.
Good, thank you.
Very nice to see William Clouston there, always talking common sense, which is very welcome here at Talk and on Morning Glory, in particular leader of the SDP, the Social Democrats, a very sensible party. Tony has got a voice note for us on Labour.
Hi, Mike. Great show as usual. Tony from Bradford here. You know, my blood is boiling with this socialist green government we've got in power. Keir Starmer, he ain't got one single backbone in his body. The guy is useless. He don't care about this country. All the people he's employed, who's working with him, they're all socialists. They hate the country. They're teaching all this socialism in schools. You know, there's more than two genders. Men can get pregnant. How can we go forward with this thinking? It's impossible. You know, and this green agenda, you know, like pushing EVs down everybody's throats, heat pumps, nobody wants them. It's going to bankrupt this country. You know, you can go green, bankrupt the country, or drill, baby, drill, like Trump said, and we can save this economy. In about 3 years' time, what's going to happen when all these illegal migrants, they're going to fill all the hotels, when all them are full? What happens then? This country's doomed.
Well, listen, Tony, I don't blame you for being angry, because a lot of people feel exactly the same way. We have hope, though, here at Morning Glory. Paul in 5 says, Mike, if 40,000 Russians crossing the border into Ukraine is seen as an invasion, why isn't 45,000 immigrants entering the UK not seen as an invasion? Well, that's a good question. It should be, shouldn't it? Paul in 5, thank you very much indeed. William, good to see you again. Coming up next, we're going to talk to Freddie Gray from The Spectator. We'll get his take on the Trump victory. This is Talk.
Where are you on all of this? Because it's really polarising.
So even Zelensky's best friends, of which the British government is one of them, lots of European governments, and he's got a lot of defenders in Washington who like the guy. They think he is a hero. He is, he didn't flee. He could have been. He could be in the south of France by now. Of course he could. He could have got out of there quick as a flash. Instead, he said, "I don't need a ride. I don't need ammo." He has put in a stalwart performance since February 2022. Even his best friends say that he overcooked it on Friday.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 25 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham. We've got Peter Cardwell in this morning for Julie Hartley-Brewer. He'll be here in about just over half an hour's time. Please, says Andrew Chelmsford, prime your audience for the pending gaslighting endeavour of the Labour government when they blame our failing economy on Ukraine, combined with Trump's tariffs, even though none are currently imposed against us. The early groundwork is already underway by the Labour Party. They will do and say anything to deflect the blame. I think that's absolutely right. Let's talk now, though, to Freddie Gray, Deputy Editor of The Spectator. Freddie, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, good to talk to you. An extraordinary few days, once again. I mean, tipped off last night, in the middle of the night for us, by Donald Trump talking to Congress in what is apparently now the longest speech ever made before Congress, 1 hour and 40 minutes. He does know how to talk, doesn't he? Let's have a look at what he had to say about the minerals deal with Zelensky in Ukraine.
Earlier today, I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians, he said. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. We do really value how much America has done to help Ukraine maintain its sovereignty and independence. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time that is convenient for you. I appreciate that he sent this letter, just got it a little while ago. Simultaneously, we've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful?
He appears to be on the road to peace, if nothing else, and certainly he's managed to get Zelensky to do what he asked him to do or what he wanted him to do last week, doesn't he?
Well, yes. I mean, in that unedifying Oval Office temper tantrum scene we saw on Friday, Trump said, "You don't have any cards to Zelensky. We can give you cards." And Zelensky replied saying, "I'm not playing cards." And a lot of people thought Zelensky was right, but fundamentally, Trump was right. Zelensky doesn't really have the cards in this situation, and that's why he had to fold, which he did yesterday.
Yeah, that's the thing. And people in this country now are watching Keir Starmer and wondering what he's been doing for the last 4 days, because he appeared to be trying to kind of replace whoever it was he thought he was replacing in that conversation by being sort of a cross between Henry Kissinger, Winston Churchill and Theodore Roosevelt, you know, and nobody's quite sure where he is now because he appears to be out of the loop.
Well, he does. I mean, it's quite an interesting moment in British-American relations because Starmer does have this opportunity to be a bridge between America and Europe. And Trump himself seems to like Starmer. I think that's sincere. And he seems willing to work with Britain. And Britain could play a key role in sort of making sure that America understands why its interests are best served by protecting Ukraine. At the same time, however, you have Washington's defense establishment essentially banning Britain from sharing intelligence with Ukraine.
Right.
Because they're very suspicious about the way the British have behaved in the last few years, and they're very suspicious of Ukraine too. So it's an interesting dynamic, and it's an opportunity for Starmer, one that he seems to be half taking, but while still talking in fancy terms about what he can do.
Well, he's trying to keep a foot in both camps, isn't he? Because there's no love lost between Trump and the European Union. As he said before, you know, they were set up to be enemies of America, and they've been very good at it, more or less, you know. And he's now likely to impose tariffs on them. If he doesn't impose them on Britain, it'll be because we're no longer in the European Union. And Starmer, because he's trying to keep the European Union happy and trying to form some kind of, you know, coalition of the willing, I would imagine has probably, I would say, at least cheesed off Trump, to say the least.
I mean, from what we understand, Trump isn't at the moment cheesed off with Keir Starmer. I think the potential for a major fallout is there. And, you know, Starmer's team were very happy with how the Thursday meeting with Trump went. But I remember Theresa May's first meeting in Trump with Washington, and Theresa May's team being very happy with how that went. And that went south pretty quickly.
Yes.
The real thing here is that Brexit does present Britain with an opportunity to be this sort of transatlantic bridge point between Europe and America. The problem is that prime ministers tend to be uncomfortable with Brexit. Keir Starmer certainly is.
Yeah.
And they're not really willing to take it.
No, exactly right. Let's have a look at what he had to say about Greenland while we're at it, because this is quite an interesting one as well.
I also have a message tonight for the incredible people of Greenland. We strongly support your right to determine your own future. And if you choose, we welcome you into the United States of America. We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it. But we need it really for international world security, and I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it.
One way or the other, we're going to get Greenland. You wouldn't bet against it, would you?
No, you certainly wouldn't. I remember when Trump first mooted the Greenland idea in his first term, and of course he was laughed off.
Right.
But it's increasingly clear he's very serious about it. And it's interesting that he's appealing to the people of Greenland now.
Yes.
Because America could effectively buy Greenland by offering it such a large sum of money that every single Greenlander would be a lot better off. And that's quite a tempting offer for the residents there.
Yeah.
Whether Denmark has any block over that will remain to be seen. But it is strategically important. I mean, American defense chiefs have talked for a long time about their fear of Russia and China breaking through the Arctic Circle and so on. And America's very, very aware of that. And also the interesting possibility that brings up, particularly with Trump talking about Canada as the 51st state, is that you then start to move a sort of North Atlantic alliance towards Britain.
Yeah.
Given we were just talking about where Britain sits between Europe and America, that might bring Britain closer into America's orbit, which is an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, all bets are off, and that's what people find fascinating, or at least people with an open mind, like me and you, find fascinating about Donald Trump, because, you know, when he says he wants to do something, inevitably he gets it done.
I quite agree. I mean, world politics has been quite boring in many ways for a long time. And the wonderful thing about Donald Trump is he makes it interesting for everyone.
He really does. Listen, good to talk to you. Freddie Gray, thank you very much indeed, Deputy Editor of The Spectator there. Let's get a voice note from Pete on Trump.
Pete from Lancashire, mate. Donald Trump, completely agree with what he's done. You know, he is trying to bring world peace and that. But this business about Greenland and we will take it and that, does that not make him as bad as other wrong-uns around the world? Anyway, great show, mate. Bye.
Well, I don't know, Pete, because as you just heard from that clip there, he's asking now the people of Greenland to see whether they want, he said, we totally support their ability to self-determine who they want to run the place. Now, the people of Greenland, I don't know if they get a referendum or whether Denmark gives them one, but they may be fearful of Russia coming over the top from the Arctic and possibly, you know, invading it or taking it or something like that. I don't know. But the bottom line is that if they decided, for example, in their wisdom, they wanted to be part of a protectorate of America, then surely that wouldn't be the same as invading them. That would be like somebody asking the Chagos Islands if they wanted to remain British, which of course nobody did. We haven't really heard much about the Chagos Islands. We haven't even talked about the Chagos Islands for a couple of days, but supposedly, and according to those in the know, one of them being Rupert Lowe from Reform, a deal is being struck even as we speak to give away the Chagos Islands with malice, a forethought to the British taxpayer, because they're not just giving it away, we're paying for the privilege of giving it away to the tune of about 18 billion. Now, people from the Labour Party, including David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, have said, oh yeah, those numbers are not true, those numbers are way off. Various junior ministers in the Foreign Office have said that. But the point is that the proof will be in the pudding, will it not? And if it does turn out to be 18 billion, amortised over several years, up to 52 billion, according to Reform, then we never said that that's what we wanted. We were never asked, and the Chagosians were never asked. So why would it be going ahead? And Trump said it might be okay. but he hadn't seen the details. So we'll see about all of that. Coming next, we're going to talk to Kevin Saunders from the Border Force, former Border Force Chief Immigration Officer. Downing Street has defended the large numbers of people that have been coming in. Just this week alone, over 600 already. And it's the first time that I think that's the biggest number we've had so far this year. Something like 26,000 now have come since Labour have been in power. And we're going to talk a bit as well about the still very, very leaky ECHR rulings that are being made. Today's migrant couple of the day are a pair of El Salvadorians who apparently belong to rival gangs in El Salvador. And if they go back, they might have to split up, so they can stay here, living presumably in a lovely house somewhere near Haringey. I've no idea. 9:35.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:37. We'll be here, of course, till 10 o'clock. Peter Cardwell in for Julie Hartley-Brewer. Mendy says this: if asking Hugh Edwards nicely doesn't work, then he should be taken to court to force him to return the £200,000 that doesn't belong to him. I think that's right. Let's get a voice note from Ash.
Hi, Mike. Ash from Preston. Why don't the BBC take Hugh Edwards to court and get that taxpayers' money back? If some pensioner or some single mother doesn't pay the £160-something for the TV licence, they soon send people round to their house to intimidate and threaten them, don't they? The BBC are cowards and should be defunded. Cheers, great show.
Yeah, absolutely right. I said this before when we were speaking about it with Rebecca from Defund the BBC. You know, they're quick enough to send somebody round to your house if you haven't paid your licence fee, but they don't bother sending somebody round to Hugh Edwards who owes them 200,000 big ones. Absolutely unbelievable. Kevin Saunders is here, former Border Force Chief Immigration Officer. Maybe they should send around one of those members of the new crack Home Office team who are supposed to be deporting foreign prisoners once they've been released from jail in this country. Kevin, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
So, here we are. The gangs have still not been smashed. The Labour government saying that they're deporting more people, but yet more people are still coming in. So we haven't really got sort of a net gain yet, have we?
We haven't got anything at the moment. I think it's PMQs today. I would hope that somebody would ask the Prime Minister how many failed asylum seekers have been removed this year.
Yes.
Because
I was going to say
probably none.
I would agree with that. I don't think they've removed any asylum seekers. A lot of the people they have removed. I think they're now claiming they've removed. I think since they've been in charge, about 29,000 people, many of whom are going voluntarily, as far as my understanding is, and they're not people who are coming here to seek asylum illegally and then just hanging around.
No, the people that they're removing are overstayers, basically. And they're catching those. They've always been catching overstayers and removing them. So it's nothing new here. It's just that the enforcement teams are doing even more, which is fantastic.
Yes, I mean the problem as well seems to me to be that as we may have people who are removed because they've overstayed whatever their visa was or whatever it is, that they're very unlikely, because asylum seeker claims have gone up in the past year. We saw that from the immigration figures just last week. And it seems as though more and more people now are coming here by legal routes to claim asylum, as well as illegal ones, even though we used to be told, oh, we don't have any legal routes to come. Well, we do, actually, and there's plenty of them. But we get a daily story now from some part of the immigration panel business of people who can't be sent home. We had, this week alone, we had the Nigerian psychopath who apparently is not allowed to be sent home to Nigeria because he's possessed by the devil, and that wouldn't go well if he was sent home. We've had the Iraqi cocaine dealer who can't be sent back because he's become too westernised and he might be beheaded for his trouble. We've had the Jamaican armed robber who can't be sent back to Jamaica because it might harm his job prospects. And the list goes on and on and on. Today we've got two people from El Salvador who belong to rival gangs back in El Salvador, and apparently if they go home they might have to split up because the gangs don't like each other.
Yes, I mean, it's absolute nonsense. But I think what would be interesting, Mike, is to actually see if all these decisions are coming from one or two Home Office judges.
Yes.
Because I know that a number of decisions which were, how shall we say, questionable, including the McDonald's chicken nuggets judgment.
Well, that was the week before, you see, so I didn't think I'd include that one.
We're all down to one immigration judge.
Yes.
So I do.
Is this the guy who's the son of the Guardian writer?
I don't know his background, but I can well believe that.
Yes, because the one who was involved in the chicken nuggets case, his dad is a frequent sort of, shall we say, opiner on the Gaza-Israel situation, and you can imagine in which direction. And he's also written an awful lot of lefty tweets, and is a former writer for the Guardian.
Oh, well, there you go, Mike.
Yeah. So I mean that is the problem, though. But well, you know, until you start appointing these judges and you start actually clearing out some of the people who clearly have got some kind of anti-British agenda, who think that we should just keep dangerous people in this country, I don't know what else you can do.
Well, no, nor do I. I mean, it is quite ridiculous, some of these decisions. They're hiding behind the Human Rights Act, so let's get rid of the Human Rights Act.
Yeah. Well, exactly. But also, let's also, if Keir Starmer wants to suddenly be the strong man of Europe, as he's been sort of posing for the past few days, he had his European summit, you know, why can't they have a proper European summit on the real danger for Europe, which is illegal migration? And the huge swathes of people coming to this continent from North Africa and Asia. That's what they really need to address, because Ukraine can be sorted out in any number of ways by a truce deal, which is going to be hammered out by the Americans and the Russians and the Ukrainians. You know, Europe should be more concerned with what is actually happening on our own borders as opposed to somebody else's.
Yes, I completely agree with you. Let's leave Ukraine to Trump. He'll sort it out one way or another. And let's worry about illegal immigration coming into Europe.
Yes.
And particularly the UK, because we keep hearing about these wonderful things that the government are going to do, but the numbers still keep going up.
Yeah.
So I wonder what's really going on.
And the boats are getting bigger as well, aren't they?
Much bigger, yes.
I mean,
and the migrants have got a new tactic as well, which is causing issues in northern France. So let's deal with these issues first.
Yeah.
and worry about Ukraine afterwards.
Yes, quite right. And the trouble is, right, we keep getting different messages from France as well. You know, we were told that they were going to change their laws so that they could actually interfere with people in the shallows as they leave France, which I'm sure they could have done in the past. They don't need a new law to do that, do they?
I'm not an expert on French law, but if they are going to do that, it could be a game changer, but I'll reserve judgment until I actually see it happening.
Yes, and in all this money changing hands, because of course we're told that they're going to increase defence spending, they're going to cut back on welfare spending, they're going to cut back on public services. Presumably some of those cutbacks might well affect the Home Office and might well affect the Border Force.
Well, could well do. I mean, something that is interesting and has just gone totally under the radar is Border Force. The Border Force cutters are basically obsolete.
Yeah.
And Border Force were promised new ones by Priti Patel, and in fact the money was there, but they've never actually materialised. So I wonder if they've been quietly scrapped.
Well, you would wonder about that. And what's the new guy doing? The new border czar who got the job, what, 2-3 months ago now?
He's going all over Europe. He's having a high old time.
Oh, great. So he's doing the old Lindsay Hoyle tour of other countries and living high on the hog, is he?
I believe that he is, I think the term is liaising with other Border Force agencies across Europe.
It's great, this racket that they get into, isn't it, these public servants? I mean, Lindsay Hoyle, we just talked about yesterday, 180,000 quid spent on jollies to various different countries, including Singapore, Doha in Qatar, you know, St. Helena, South Africa, Cape Town, the Cayman Islands, Los Angeles, Gibraltar, the list just goes on and on and on. Spreading the good word about the British Parliament, how great it is, and presumably this guy, the Borders guy, is doing the same thing.
Well, I don't know the guy, so I don't quite know what he's doing at all. But I know that a former Border Force chief did liaise with world authorities, but there again, he could, because he actually ran the Canadian Immigration Service for a number of years.
Right. Unbelievable stuff. Well, thank you very much indeed. Kevin Saunders, our former Border Force Chief Immigration Officer. Shall we have a look at Keir Starmer saying how he's going to smash those gangs? Check it out.
You will have helped to smash the gangs, secure our borders, and save countless lives. Smash the criminal gangs, and they are criminal gangs, that are running this vile trade and putting people in the boats. Take those gangs down. I think smashing the gangs that are taking people's money is a deterrent. I think you have to smash those gangs. The only way to stop that is to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade. Smash the gangs.
What are you going to do to those gangs? What about the smuggling guns? What about them?
To smash the people smuggling gangs.
People smashing gang guns. Ging gang, gooly gooly, whatcha? Ging gang goo. Let's talk to Greg in Edinburgh. Hello, Greg.
Hi there, Mike. How you doing?
Very well, sir. What can I do for you?
No, I was really just going to disagree with you.
Okay.
On what you said earlier. I don't normally, but it was your take on the treatment of President Zelensky by President Trump.
Yes.
I just thought that you'd mentioned that President... oh, God, I've forgotten his name.
Zelensky?
Yeah, no, Biden.
Oh, Biden. It's easy to forget him. I wish we could.
Exactly. No, but he'd never called out President Zelensky.
No, I didn't say that. No, I said Biden had a big row with Zelensky.
Yeah, well, yes, indeed. But my point was that he did it in private. We never heard anything about that.
Well, we did because it got written about. Otherwise, we wouldn't know about it.
Well, but my point was that President Trump really shouldn't have behaved the way he did with President Zelensky, because he's meant to be the leader of the free world and is not showing leadership skills by.
But if the result, Greg, of him behaving like that is that Zelensky is now coming back and is willing to do all the things that he should have been willing to do on Friday, isn't that a good thing?
Yes, well, absolutely. But my point being that Zelensky had attended a week before, on the day of the great bawling out, to do what he was going to do today. So are we?
Well, no, he wasn't. No, you see, he wasn't. That was why they had the row, because the reason they had the row was Zelensky was turning up to sign the minerals deal, but he then started lecturing Trump about why he didn't believe that the Trump administration was right to get diplomatic sort of settlement with Russia. And that was what kind of set it all off, because he said you can't deal with the Russians like that because it won't work. Now, you can say that Trump should have been, less ready to react in the way that he did, and you might be right about that. But I think in the end, Zelensky is now willing to do more for a peace deal because he was basically hung out to dry. And then the aid was stopped.
My point was, though, you never treat someone who works for you, which basically we all work at the moment for President Trump.
Well, I don't.
The UK and the EU, and we're all beholden to him at the moment. He's the only show in town. So if you're subordinates, which we are...
Well, I don't take that view, but you carry on.
Well, we can't do anything without him, so we're pretty beholden to him. So, but my point being, you don't treat someone who belittle them and expect to get a good reaction. If you were a boss...
Well, except it's worked, though, hasn't it? So it's that your argument's already been defeated by the events.
It would have worked if he'd done it in private.
You don't know that.
Well, then Zelensky would be a stupid man. But as a supervisor, as a boss, as a leader...
Yeah, but we're not talking about supervisors and bosses. He's not asking you to go and take your forklift truck down the end of the road and pick something up and bring it back. He's asking you to stop fighting Russia.
He's purporting to be the leader of the free world.
He is.
So he should act with a certain...
Listen. In a world of perfection, you're absolutely right, Greg. But in the world in which we live, which is very far from perfect, you have to deal with the cards you've got. And as he said to Zelensky that day, you haven't got any cards to deal with, right? And now Zelensky's come back, realised he hasn't got any cards to deal with, and now he's doing what Trump wants him to do. In my view, that's a successful diplomatic exercise.
It's a poor leader to...
If he's a bit rude, I don't really mind.
As a supervisor, I never tore a strip off of someone who, in public like that, and humiliated them.
Right. Did any of them let you down in your role as supervisor?
Well, occasionally they did.
Of course they did.
Rollicking, but they never...
so they got a rollicking, right.
It belittles them, and it belittles you to do that in public, and it doesn't get the best results it could be.
It's not something. It's not something I would do either. But you and I are not dealing in those kind of stakes. We're not dealing in those kind of high stakes. So the fact that it's all happening now and is beginning to look like Trump was right would give the lie to what you're saying. I don't think you're wrong in most situations, Greg. I would agree with you. But I think when you're the President of the United States, leader of the free world, you pretty much do what you want.
Well, that was exactly my point. He's the only show in town,
yeah.
And anyone who says there's an alternative to what he's doing at the moment, they need to give us the alternative, and no one can. The Europeans, whether it's anyone else, has.
Yeah, well, maybe John Swinney. Maybe somebody should ask John Swinney. He's got some funny ideas at the moment, hasn't he?
John Swinney has got funny ideas about everything.
Exactly right. You wouldn't even know which toilet to use in the White House. Greg, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's get a voice note from Gaz.
Morning, Mike. Great show, mate. Gaz from Pontefract. I've just been watching Meghan Markle, Sussex, and she's inspired me. So I've just created a bowl of Weetabix, but I thought I'll throw a few crunchy nut cornflakes on top of there as well and elevate it from something ordinary for my breakfast. And you know what? It's fantastic. Chuckling to myself, all these wonderful friends, and we're all friends this, we're all friends that on the advert for her show. You know for a fact that as soon as filming ended, she's like, just ghost them, block them, ghost them, never see them again, friends for life, yeah, whatever. Cheers, mate, have a great day, bud.
Some of them she's never met before either, these friends for life. It's absolutely brilliant. Gary says, can Trump please buy the UK and get rid of Starmer? And it's a good one from Ian in Warrington. Mike, we were told that our energy bills have gone up because of the war in Ukraine. Will they go down if the war ceases? I think not. It's a good point, though, isn't it? One from Rebecca, who says, Thieving Reeves said last November, because this was such a big, hard budget, they would be having annual budgets in future. So why is anyone talking about another budget? Surely Reeves doesn't tell lies. Nah, absolutely not, Becky. She certainly doesn't tell lies. She might be a bit economical with the truth. Maybe we should ask the fake solicitor, Jonathan Reynolds. What do you got to say, Jonathan? I used to be a solicitor. No, you didn't. It's 9:54.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, do these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:56. Peter Cardwell coming in for Julie Hartley-Brewer. We've got a voice note from Jerry on Meghan.
Morning, mate. Jerry Fairchild. Fantastic show as always. Listen, that Meghan Markle is an absolute crackpot. Her name isn't Sussex. That's the title, Duchess of Sussex. Her second name should be Windsor, because that's what Harry's called. Harry Windsor. King Charles Windsor. Prince William Windsor. All the rest are just titles, not their actual name. Cheers, Mike.
Well, it wouldn't surprise you that she's completely and utterly, made a balls up of all of that, and she didn't really have a clue what her actual name, what his name is, never mind her own name. And also, she's known as Meghan Markle. Most actresses stay as their maiden name because that's what they're known as. They don't change it because that's what somebody who just wants to make a point is doing. Let's go to Mike, who's in Anglesey, wants to talk about Ukraine. Mike, very good morning to you.
Oh, hi, Mike. How are you?
Very well, sir. What can I do for you? How's sunny Anglesey today?
Oh, it's beautiful here.
Nice.
I've just made you aware that I was in the army for about over 30-odd years.
Yeah.
So I've seen everything from when the Berlin Wall was coming up right through to my last tour of Afghanistan in 2010. I was in Iraq as well.
Okay.
When people stand there, and sometimes they say, oh, we should fight and fight and fight. You know, I just want to sort of say the way of our armed forces have been depleted over many years. Like when I was out in Germany, we had 3 armoured divisions out in Germany ready for the Soviet threat.
Right.
Then obviously we're meant to be in peace, if you know what I mean. And then, we're dealing with that type of sort of attitude with Putin. I believe a peace deal needs to be done.
Right.
After working, when I was out in Iraq in 2003, we didn't have any equipment, and obviously you know the story behind that. I actually gave evidence at the Iraq inquiry about our kit and everything.
Right.
So when people stand there and say we should fight, I do believe that once we start putting troops on the ground, God forbid if any of our soldiers are actually fatalities out there, then